Chapter 1914. The experts of Heavenly Music Parlor were scared out of their wits. The youth in linen clothes suddenly felt dispirited and bored. He sighed, turned around, and walked into the courtyard, no longer paying attention to those cowards. They were indeed too cowardly, and he was not interested at all. Instead, it made him feel even more bored. He rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, "Ants? Hee, I finally understand why those big shots would sigh like that. It's indeed boring. Young master, all beings are ants in the face of the great Tao." The old woman reminded him lest the young man thought too highly of himself. The young man in linen clothes lay lazily on the rocking chair and chuckled. "That's right. In the eyes of Granny and my father, I'm just a nobody. I'm no different from an ant." Immediately after, he thought of something and pounded his chest, lamenting, "I suddenly realized that I've been made a scapegoat for that guy." The old woman rolled her eyes. "Brat, you only realized it now?" However, she changed her tone when she spoke. Her voice was calm and indifferent, like a god speaking softly. "Young master, I'm not someone to be trifled with." The cheeky young man's expression suddenly turned serious. "Granny, I'm not afraid of trouble. Please don't break your fast on eating meat." A gentle light appeared in the old woman's murky eyes as she nodded. Only then did the young man in linen clothes smile in a carefree manner, as though a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders. However, he knew in his heart that although he was a little lawless compared to his granny, he was a completely harmless and obedient child. If his granny were to go berserk, she would be able to pierce through the heavens. Outside the courtyard, the experts of Heavenly Music Parlor escaped death and left hurriedly with unconcealable fear. Elder Chung, one was a sage king, but he didn't even have time to react before he was killed by the linen-clothed young man. When those people returned and reported the news, the upper echelons of Heavenly Music Parlor were in an uproar. "What? Elder Chung, one was killed? How audacious! This is our Heavenly Music Parlor support boat. Doesn't that damn thing know what respect is? He must be the murderer who killed the expert of the primordial Tao court." An angry voice resounded in the hall. The brows of the supreme elder Hua Dian knit together tightly, while his expression was terrifyingly gloomy, and he suddenly shouted explosively, "Shut up!" His voice was like a thunderclap, and it caused everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter. Hua Dian took a deep breath and said, "Tell me about that young man's identity and background." "Supreme Elder, it's recorded on the boarding account that the linen-clothed youth is called Little Nine, and there's an old woman by his side that acts as a retainer." An elder hurriedly said, "Little Nine?" Everyone instantly knew that this was a fake name. "Where did he come from?" Hua Dian asked. "To be able to stay in the courtyard paradise of welcoming Guest Mountain, one must not be an ordinary person." Cold sweat broke out on the elder's forehead as he said with a trembling voice, "That youth, Little Nine, and the other spent 3,000,000 myriad Tao crystals to stay in the welcoming Guest Mountain." Everyone was astounded because this was a sky-high price that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to produce. Moreover, it was only used to rent a courtyard, which made people feel that it was a waste of money. At this time, Wei Yunlian suddenly said he would rather spend 3,000,000 myriad Tao crystals than expose his real identity. Moreover, he can kill a Saint King with one move. This is very suspicious. Everyone's pupils shrank. Hua Jian suddenly stood up, his eyes bursting with killing intent, and said, "I'd like to see who this Little Nine is." In the quiet courtyard of welcoming Guest Mountain. After the song, Lin Sun's thoughts were pulled back from the trance with a lingering sound. He raised his eyes and saw that Lu Qingyan was also looking at him. Her clear eyes were brighter than the stars in the sky. "Senior, you seem to be thinking of something?" Lu Qingyan asked softly. She was best at the way of music, which was ever-changing and most suitable for the changes of mood and mood. She could even spy on all the secrets in the heart of the listener with a piece of music. But just now, she didn't do so, which was tantamount to offending him. Even so, she was still keenly aware that the emotional fluctuations of Yu Xian in front of her seemed to be a little too strong. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Can I have a look at this ancient rhythm, ocarina?" Lu Qingyan handed it over with a smile. Lin Sun took it in his hand and pressed his 10 fingers naturally on the holes of the ancient rhythm ocarina, gently rubbing it. Lu Qingyan said, "Speaking of this instrument, it reminds me of a friend." Lin Sun was stunned. He looked up and saw that Lu Qingyan seemed to be lost in reminiscence, with a smile on her lips. She continued, "A long time ago, I traveled in a place far away from the starry sky, Ancient Road. It was there that I accidentally came into contact with this unique instrument, ancient rhythm ocarina. I fell in love with it at first sight. But the ancient rhythm ocarina in my hand is seriously damaged, so I've been looking for someone who can help me repair the instrument. It was also by chance that I met that friend." When Lu Qingyan said this, the smile on her lips became stronger. He also told me that the music in the world is inseparable from the 5 tones of gong, shang, jiao, zheng, and yu. Only the ancient rhythm ocarina can play 9 different tones. In the end, it was he who helped me repair this instrument and made a breakthrough in my pursuit of music. Lin Sun listened silently. Of course, he was himself. When he was in Xiao Empire, he got to know Lu Qingyan, the world's #1 artistic practitioner, because of the ancient rhythm ocarina. Lu Qingyan's eyes became bright when she said this. Later, we became friends. He was an extremely bold person, always doing unexpected things, and doing many great things that shook the world. Immediately, Lu Qingyan's eyes were filled with sadness. But later, when I left Xiao Empire, I haven't seen him since. "Do you miss this friend very much?" Lin Sun asked. Lu Qingyan shook her head and sighed faintly. "About 6 years ago, I finally heard some news about him, but it was not good news. Now I don't want to see him on the ancient starry sky path." Lin Sun couldn't help asking why. Lu Qingyan raised a pair of clear eyes and stared at Lin Sun, because although the ancient starry sky path is vast, it can no longer accommodate him. Lin Sun was shocked. He was finally sure that Lu Qingyan should also have heard what happened in Kunlun ruins 6 years ago, and knew that he was now wanted all over the world. "Senior, the starry sky can't accommodate him alone. If he appears, won't it be very dangerous?" Lu Qingyan's voice was low. "So, I would rather not see him again than let him appear on this ancient starry sky path." Lin Sun was touched, and a myriad of emotions surged in his heart. It turned out that there were still people in this world who were worried about his safety when he didn't know it. How lucky it is to have a friend like Miss Qingyan care about him so much, Lin Sun said with a smile. Lu Qingyan smiled and said, "Friends should and should be like this. What do you think, Senior?" Lin Sun deeply agreed. At this moment, he frowned and stood up, saying, "Something seems to have happened outside. Miss Qingyan, stay here and don't move. I'll go and have a look." With that, he walked out of the courtyard. "Is it him?" Looking at his back gradually disappearing, Lu Qingyan was stunned and silent. From the first time they met, this senior Yuxian gave her a sense of déjà vu. But she was confused and couldn't be sure. When Lin Sun walked out of the courtyard, he saw at a glance that the mountain path was brightly lit. A group of big shots of Heavenly Sound Pavilion gathered together and blocked the door of a courtyard. The strong people living in every courtyard of Guest Mountain were all alarmed like Lin Sun and were paying attention to all this. Why did they go to find that guy? Lin Sun was stunned and recognized that the blocked courtyard was the place where the young man in linen lived. Lin Sun showed a strange expression and stood there, waiting to see what would happen. The door to the courtyard opened, and the youth in linen clothes walked out lazily. He said weakly, "I knew it. This black pot has been put on my head. Damn it, I shouldn't have been so cheap just now. Aren't I just looking for trouble for myself?" Outside the courtyard, the atmosphere was solemn. The group of big shots of Heavenly Sound Pavilion was led here by Hua Dian, the Supreme Elder. There were peerless Saint Kings and Saint Kings, a large group of them. Coupled with Hua Dian, the existence of the Quasi-Emperor realm, standing there together, the horrible aura they exuded was enough to make the world tremble. Just like at this moment, countless strong people on the boat were paying attention to this place with their divine thoughts. Everyone seemed extremely careful and felt depressed. After all, this lineup was really too strong. However, The young man in linen clothes was alone. Not only did he swagger out of the courtyard, but he also ignored Hua Jian and the others. This caused many people to be extremely shocked. Who was this young man? Where did he get his confidence from? Did you kill Qingwen? Hua Jian said indifferently with a gloomy expression. He resisted the killing intent in his heart and did not attack immediately. The young man was too calm, and his origin was extremely mysterious. Ordinary people would never have the courage to kill the successor of the primitive Taoist court. And he did not kill one, but a group of them. You mean the old trash who threatened me just now? The young man in linen asked with a smile. His words made everyone present furious. How should they answer this question? If they said yes, it was like admitting that Cheng was an old trash, but they could not say no. Little thing, you are still sharp-tongued when you are about to die. Believe it or not, I will capture you now, pull out your tendons, and skin you alive. A peerless Saint King realm elder scolded with great power. The youth in linen sneered and squinted his eyes. He pointed at his own nose and said provocatively, "Didn't you say you would pull out your tendons and peel off your skin? If you can't do it, I will beat you to death." Chapter 19:15. The young man's provocation enraged the Saint King, who spoke. He was about to attack, but was stopped by Hua Dian. Hua Dian's voice was cold. "Young man, let me ask you again. Did you kill those people from the primitive Tao court?" "Aye." The young man was about to speak when a terrifying pressure came from Hua Dian, making his body stiffen as if he was under the pressure of 100,000 mountains. At the same time, Hua Dian said indifferently, "Remember, you only have one chance. If you talk nonsense again, your life will be in danger." In the courtyard, the old woman appeared silently. The young man's forehead was full of blue veins. His frivolous expression was replaced by a rare sense of calmness and sharpness. In the depths of his eyes, there was a hint of madness. But in the end, he took a deep breath and suppressed his killing intent. He shouted, "Brother, do you really have the heart to see me take the blame? They're going to kill me." All the people in Hua Dian cast their eyes to the distance and saw Lin Sun standing in front of a courtyard. "Yu Xian." Someone recognized Lin Sun and was displeased. How could this trash be the murderer of the primitive Tao court? The others also sneered and looked away. Yu Xian was a Saint King of the Yu clan. They had already figured out his background and did not believe he had the ability to do such a thing. "Little thing, you dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. It's not good to bite people. We all know what Yu Xian is capable of. Don't you think it's ridiculous to say such stupid words?" They looked at the young man in linen with even more unkind eyes. Lin Sun frowned. Of course, he was unhappy to be called trash. But when he saw the young man's expression, he could not help but feel happy. The hemp-clothed youth looked as if he had eaten a dead fly. He held his forehead with his hand and said painfully, "I'm so unlucky. Not only did I become a scapegoat for others, but I also encountered a group of blind fools who came to question me. Granny, I don't want to live anymore." Hua Dian's face was gloomy. This kid was still acting like a rascal. Did he really not know how to write the word death? Just as he was about to do something, his pupils suddenly constricted and his entire body trembled. His expression changed drastically as he looked at the courtyard behind the hemp-robed youth. In the courtyard, the old woman had a kind expression on her face. She slowly walked over. "Young master, it's better to live than to die. Your life is much more precious than theirs." His voice was filled with incomparable affection. Many people frowned. Only then did they notice the old woman's existence. The Saint King couldn't help but say angrily, "Old woman, you bang." Halfway through his sentence, the man's body suddenly exploded. His flesh and blood fell to the ground, and a thick stench of blood filled the air. The great figures of the heavenly music parlor were shocked, and their expressions changed. Only now did they realize that this unremarkable and senile old woman was actually a terrifying existence that had concealed herself deeply. Even Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. That old woman was not simple. Only the youth in hemp garments had a look of despair on his face. He sighed and said, "Didn't you say you wouldn't break the vegetarian diet?" The old woman had a kind look in her eyes. It's just an ant. It can't be considered as breaking an oath. The hemp-clothed youth laughed heartily, looking down on everyone. Hua Jian of the Heavenly Music Parlor greets Senior. At this moment, Hua Jian, who had a gloomy and murderous look on his face, suddenly bowed deeply and said respectfully, "If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me." The back of Hua Dian's shirt was soaked in cold sweat. Everyone was stunned, then shocked, and fell silent. Hua Dian was an old monster in the Boundary Emperor realm, but at this moment he was respectfully addressing the other party as Senior and bowing his head to beg for forgiveness. This was like a bolt of lightning, and the people of the Heavenly Music Parlor who had come to denounce her were all stunned. Could this old woman be a Boundary Emperor? Everyone's scalps went numb at the thought of this. The old woman walked over and stood behind the youth in hemp garments. She ignored Hua Dian, who had been bowing his head, and asked the youth in hemp garments kindly, "Young master, what do you think we should do? If you feel wronged, then kill them all." Everyone was even more shocked, and their faces were filled with shock. If the old woman was so terrifying, then wouldn't the background of this young master beside her be even more terrifying? Senior. At this moment, Hua Jian fell to his knees. "We have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and forgive us this time." A quasi-emperor had disregarded his dignity and knelt in front of everyone. All the experts who were secretly watching this scene could not help but gasp. Hua Jian was the supreme elder of the Heavenly Music Parlor, a respected quasi-emperor, but he had knelt down and begged for forgiveness. There was no need to mention just how shocking this scene was. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. He could vaguely guess what kind of existence the old woman was. There was a silence. The old woman still ignored the kneeling Hua Dian and only looked at the youth in hemp garments. The youth in hemp garments looked uncertain. After having the support of the old woman, he had changed his arrogance and domineering attitude, as if he had encountered a huge problem. After a long time, he sighed, "Granny, didn't you say that I am not allowed to cause trouble on this trip?" The old woman said seriously, "We won't cause trouble, but it doesn't mean that we are afraid of trouble. Moreover, this time, young master, you have only suffered an undeserved calamity." The youth in hemp garments took a deep breath and said, "Before this trip, my father said that my temperament is like an ape and a horse, and that I can only go home when I subdue my heart. But now it seems that the path of subduing one's heart is not so easy." He laughed self-deprecatingly. "If it was in the past, I would have killed them long ago. But now, for the sake of subduing one's heart, I feel uncomfortable all over." A trace of pity appeared in the old woman's eyes, and she said, "This is just the beginning. There's no need to be anxious." The youth in hemp garments nodded. At this moment, Hua Dian and the others were like prisoners waiting to be judged. All of them were terrified and uneasy, and their hearts were filled with great terror. The youth in hemp garments suddenly kicked Hua Dian, causing the supreme elder of Quasi-Emperor realm to fall back and roll on the ground. He was in an extremely sorry state. He did not dare to resist at all, and even took the initiative to withdraw the defensive energy on his body, for fear that he would injure the youth in hemp garments. When the youth in hemp garments saw this, he felt an inexplicable sense of disgust, and he pointed at Hua Dian and scolded, "You are a dignified quasi-emperor, but you have no skin, no face, and no strength of character. No wonder you haven't become an emperor at your age. Trash like you can forget about becoming an emperor in this lifetime." He seemed to still be unable to vent his anger, so he charged forward and fiercely kicked Hua Dian a few more times. One of his kicks even landed on Hua Dian's face, causing his face to turn red and swollen. However, he still lowered his head and smiled along with Hua Dian. "Old trash." The youth in hemp garments scolded fiercely, but for some reason, he felt a sense of melancholy in his heart. A quasi-emperor, in order to drag out an ignoble existence, would he throw away his dignity and character? "Get lost." He waved his hand. Hua Dian looked as if he had been saved, and he kowtowed gratefully, but his eyes were fixed on the old woman. The old woman said, "What? Do you still want to stay and be a kowtowing bug?" Only then did Hua Dian get up in a panic, and he hurriedly left with the people of the Heavenly Music Pavilion. He did not want to stay in this place for the rest of his life. Wait. The voice of a youth in hemp garments rang out, causing Hua Dian's body to stiffen and his heart to skip a beat. Was this young master going to go back on his word? The youth in hemp garments said calmly, "Where's the skin and tendons pulled out?" His words were like a bolt of lightning, causing the soul of the absolute Saint King beside Hua Dian to almost jump out of his body, and he fell to his knees, begging for mercy. The old woman grabbed across the air, and in an instant, the absolute Saint King's skin was ripped off, and his tendons were pulled out inch by inch. His entire body contorted in pain and fear, and he let out an incomparably shrill scream of pain. But from beginning to end, he was powerless to struggle. That bloody and cruel scene caused Hua Dian and the others to turn pale and their mouths to tremble, but no one dared to step forward to plead for mercy. In the end, although the absolute Saint King survived, his vitality was greatly damaged, and he was taken away by Hua Dian and the others in a hurry. The old woman let out a light snort, and then the strong men who were secretly watching all this felt as if their souls had been hammered, and they almost coughed up blood. They didn't dare to look in that direction again. After doing all this, the old woman glanced at Lin Sun in the distance with calm eyes. But Lin Sun's body was tense at this moment, like a tiny ant being stared at by a god. Although it was only for a moment, the old woman withdrew her gaze, but Lin Sun knew it was a silent warning. At this time, the youth in hemp garments suddenly jumped onto the wall and said fiercely, "Bro, I've taken the blame for you once. This is a great favor, and you must repay me in the future." Lin Sun smiled slightly. "Although I want to thank you very much, I've never asked you to take the blame after all. This favor, I don't owe you." "You." The youth in hemp garments glared angrily. "Granny, I think we should let this guy taste the feeling of pulling out his tendons and peeling off his skin." The old woman smiled and said, "Sure." The youth in hemp garments was startled, and he hurriedly said, forget it. Let's not stoop to his level." Lin Sun smiled, turned around, and walked into the courtyard. Watching him leave, the youth in hemp garments said calmly, "Granny, I was wondering how much the strength of character and dignity in this world are worth. Now I find that I was wrong. At least that guy is different. He has a bit of strength of character and dignity." The old woman looked kind and listened quietly. Good. No wonder I felt that this guy was different from others at the first sight." The youth in hemp garments showed a bright smile. The old woman still listened with a smile. She didn't tell the youth beside her that the guy might have strength of character and dignity, but he also had confidence that was different from others. From the beginning to the end, the man didn't have a trace of fear at all, and he was as calm as a rock. This could only prove that the man was not afraid of her, the old woman. Thinking about it, how could the person who dared to kill the primitive Taoist court be an ordinary person? In comparison, although the young master was born with innate intelligence and talent that was unparalleled throughout the ages, in the end, he was still lacking in the tempering of worldly affairs. Chapter 1916. After that night, the news of the Heavenly Music Parlor's supreme Elder Hua Dian kneeling down and begging for mercy spread like wildfire on the boat. How powerful was a quasi-emperor? On the entire starry sky ancient path, he could be considered a powerhouse. Furthermore, Hua Dian's identity was not ordinary. He was the supreme elder of the Purple Hung Galaxy's #1 orthodoxy, and his name had been known throughout the Purple Hung Galaxy for a long time. But now, on his own sex boat, he had knelt down. This matter was undoubtedly too humiliating and dealt a heavy blow to the reputation of the Heavenly Music Parlor. First, a group of primitive Tao court experts were killed. Then, this quasi-emperor Hua Dian had no choice but to kneel down and beg for mercy in order to live. The Heavenly Music Parlor has lost a lot of face. Many people sighed to themselves. There is no lack of gloating people watching the Heavenly Music Parlor show. To be able to make a quasi-emperor kneel down and beg for mercy, that young man's identity is not simple. More people were shocked and began to pay attention to the youth, trying to guess his identity. But no one could say for sure. All they knew was that he was riding the boat under the name Little Nine. The most terrifying thing is the old lady beside him. She is most likely an emperor-level being. Of course, the one who received the most attention was undoubtedly the old lady beside the youth. After all, even a noble quasi-emperor like Hua Dian could only prostrate himself before her. Impossible. If an emperor-level being was here, he could travel the universe and travel between worlds. How could he be like us, traveling by boat? Someone else retorted. Everyone knew that emperor-level beings were like supreme overlords on the starry sky ancient path. They could cover the sky with one hand and were omnipotent. If a quasi-emperor was already an unreachable existence in the eyes of the world, then an emperor-level being was simply a legend that could illuminate the heavens and deter the stars. Why would such an existence need to travel by boat? Furthermore, have any of you ever heard of an emperor-level being a servant to a young man? Someone else came up with a more convincing deduction that won the approval of many. Which emperor-level being was not a legendary figure? Who in this world was qualified to make them willing to be servants? However, no matter how they guessed and deduced, no one was able to determine the origins of the young man and the old woman. For a time, this pair of master and servant seemed to be even more mysterious in the eyes of all the experts on the boat. As for the Yu Xian, played by Lin Sun, no one cared about him from beginning to end. He didn't even have a sense of existence. In this regard, Lin Sun was happy to see it happen and hoped that no one would pay attention to it. Being low-key was the way to be low-key. To the experts of the heavenly music parlor, this day and night was a nightmare. First, a group of experts from the primordial Tao court were brutally murdered, causing great panic on the rocking ship. Following that, a pair of terrifying master and servant, the hemp-clothed youth and the old woman, appeared. Even the supreme elder Hua Dian had no choice but to kneel and beg for mercy. This series of blows almost drove all the experts in the heavenly music parlor to the brink of collapse. This boat belonged to the heavenly music pavilion. But now, they were the ones who suffered the greatest blow and impact. It was said that after the supreme elder Hua Dian returned, he immediately went into closed-door cultivation. As for when he would come out, no one knew. The experts of the heavenly music pavilion were all distressed. They knew that Hua Dian had suffered such a great blow that he was too ashamed to show his face again. What should we do? For a time, everyone in the heavenly music pavilion was in a state of panic. In the end, it was another supreme elder of the heavenly music pavilion, Liang Chuan, who stepped forward to stabilize the situation. Liang Chuan, an expert in the quasi-emperor realm, had hair as white as snow and a youthful appearance. In terms of foundation and cultivation, he was even slightly stronger than Hua Dian. The boat heading to the primordial world was guarded by Liang Chuan and Hua Dian, two experts in the quasi-emperor realm. In a large hall, Liang Chuan gathered the senior members of the heavenly music pavilion and issued 3 orders. From today onwards, no one is allowed to provoke the master and servant. They are not to be seen as murderers who killed the experts of the primordial Tao court. I will not interfere in the matter of dealing with Lu Qingyan, but before we reach the primordial world, there must be no more infighting. Everyone silently accepted the first 2 orders. They did not refute, nor did they have the courage to refute. But when she heard the last order, Wu Yunlian jumped out and couldn't help saying, "Supreme Elder, Lu Qingyan is the person that young Master Kanyu of the primordial Tao court took a fancy to. The death of the primordial Tao court experts on our boat must have something to do with her. Are we just going to let it go?" "Yes." Some others also nodded. Liang Chuan frowned and said, I don't care about Lu Qingyan's matter, but if anyone dares to fight among themselves, don't blame me for being rude." With that, he flicked his sleeves and left. He was wholeheartedly devoted to cultivation and extremely hated this kind of infighting. If it weren't for the fact that Hua Dian had suffered such a great blow this time, he wouldn't have cared about these things at all. Watching Liang Chuan leave, everyone looked at each other. "Senior Sister Wu, what does Supreme Elder Liang Chuan mean?" Someone couldn't help asking. Wu Yunlian took a deep breath and said coldly, "No infighting means that he won't watch us deal with Lu Qingyan. But it doesn't matter. As long as this bitch is on the boat, she is destined to be unable to escape when we arrive at the Hongmeng world. Speaking of this, Wu Yunlian remembered something and said coldly, "By the way, after a period of time, the boat will enter the White Emperor Star area. We will dock there for 3 days. During these 3 days, we must keep an eye on Lu Qingyan. We must not let her take the opportunity to abscond." Many people nodded in agreement. All the strong men of the primordial Tao court were dead. If Lu Qingyan was allowed to escape, how could the Heavenly Sound School explain Kongyu? As time went by, the atmosphere on the boat gradually calmed down. This made many people breathe a sigh of relief. At least it proved that the murderer who killed the primordial Tao court experts had no intention of continuing to commit murder on the boat. Similarly, the life of Lin Sun and Lu Qingyan also returned to peace. Although Lu Qingyan still had something on her mind, she was obviously much more clear-minded than before. Occasionally, she would personally make tea for Lin Sun to drink. Lin Sun devoted himself to cultivation. Not only did the cultivation of the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture advance rapidly, but the tempering of the 5 viscera also made amazing changes. In his 5 viscera, there were 5 divine lights, green, red, black, yellow, and white, condensing into embryonic halos. Every breath produced a wonderful rhythm like life. This was the 5 viscera divine fetus. The great way of the Golden Court scripture was divided into 4 realms, namely, the 5 accumulation realm, the 5 color realm, the 5 taste realm, and the 5 virtues realm. In the past, as Lin Sun condensed the 5 viscera divine fetus, his comprehension of the great way of the Golden Court scripture had already broken through to the 5 color realm. In this realm, the 5 true spirits in the 5 viscera would become corporeal and display their own appearances. For example, the verdant wood true spirit had the appearance of everlasting vitality and evergreen. Until reaching the 5 taste realm, the 5 spirits would break out of the shell in the 5 viscera divine fetus and have their own taste, just like each person exuding different charm. The 5 virtues realm would enable the 5 doppelgangers to have their own spiritual awareness and Taoism. At this time, Lin Sun's tempering of the 5 viscera divine fetus was on the verge of breaking through the 5 taste realm. In particular, the greenwood spirit in the liver produced an extremely strong rhythm, as if it was alive, as if life would be born at any time. If I'm able to cultivate the greenwood true spirit, then it'll be equivalent to possessing a greenwood Tao body clone. At that time, I'll be able to fuse my cultivation into it, and even an Emperor Realm expert would probably be unable to discern my true identity. After a day of cultivation, Lin Sun fell into meditation. He had a faint feeling that the hemp-clothed youth, little 9, and the old woman had long seen through that this Yu Xian was a disguise. This made Lin Sun a little vigilant. There were bound to be many Emperor Realm cultivators in the Hongmeng world. Once they noticed his existence, they could easily see through his disguise. But if he could cultivate the 5 viscera divine fetus, it would be completely different. Even if someone saw through his disguise as Yu Xian, they would never be able to guess his true identity. The only trouble Lin Sun felt was that the boy in linen often sat on the wall and chatted with him with a smile. He was like a chatterbox. However, after Lin Sun activated the forbidden formation in the courtyard to isolate the outside world, this trouble was solved. At that time, the boy in linen looked resentful, like an abandoned widow, and clamored to smash Lin Sun's door. But in the end, he didn't go out of the courtyard. At most, he just stood on the wall and looked into the distance. On this day, the support ship sailed into the White Emperor Star Field and stopped in the sky above a great world called Golden Sky. Some passengers hurriedly got off the boat and began to trade with the forces of the Golden Sky world for cultivation materials and treasures from all over the world. There were also some passengers who went to the Golden Sky world in groups for sightseeing. Reading 10,000 books was like walking 10,000 miles. For practitioners, traveling the starry world was also a rare and precious cultivation. All kinds of things encountered along the way could be regarded as a kind of sharpening. The Golden Sky world was the largest world in the White Emperor Star area, where the Jintian clan, a primitive emperor clan, lived. Similarly, the Jintian clan was also the largest force in the White Emperor Star area. Its ancestor was the White Emperor, one of the famous 5 emperors in primitive times. A big world was named Golden Sky. This star region was crowned by the name of White Emperor. It wasn't hard to imagine just how powerful the Jintian clan was. In fact, in the whole starry ancient way, the Jintian clan was also a giant existence, not inferior to the Kuan clan, Su clan, Kong clan, and other primitive emperor clans. On this day, Lin Sun also planned to travel to the Golden Sky world with Lu Qingyan. But as soon as he walked out of the gate of the courtyard, he was stopped by a group of people. P.S. Goldfish got married on July 1st of the Gregorian calendar, so there was only 1 month left. It was estimated that she would have no time to write during the half month of marriage. At that time, if Goldfish asked for leave for half a month, everyone would be very unhappy. Chapter 1917. There was a famous White Emperor city in the Golden Heaven world, which was listed as one of the 6 ancient cities of the Starry Sky Ancient Path. White Emperor City was built on top of the clouds. It was built with a kind of icy soul snow stone that only existed in the primordial age. The stone was snow-white and smooth, and it was shrouded in mist. It was able to present the spectacle of icy clouds and flying snow. This city stood towering above the clouds in the sky and bathed in the radiance of the morning stars. It had experienced the vicissitudes of time and had survived until now. It was extremely grand and ancient. In the eyes of ordinary people in the Golden Heaven world, White Emperor City could be called a holy city, a place where only immortals could go. On the other hand, in the eyes of cultivators, White Emperor City was like a place of pilgrimage. It was the most prosperous city of cultivators in the world. It was a gathering of rare treasures from all over the world. Lin Sun and Lu Qingyan planned to go to the city to have a look and see this famous ancient city. Unexpectedly, as soon as they opened the gate of the courtyard, they saw a group of strong practitioners of heavenly sound pavilion blocking the way. The leader was an elder at the peak of the Saint King realm named Yujun. There were also 3 Saint Kings and a group of disciples at the peak of the Great Saint realm. Among them was Zhan Bing, who once regarded Lin Sun as a coward. He had come to provoke Lin Sun, but Lin Sun was not fooled and ignored him. Junior Sister Qingyan, we have received orders that you are not allowed to go to the Golden Heaven world without permission. You have to stay in the courtyard for 3 days. It was Zhan Bing who spoke. He directly ignored Lin Sun with a fake smile. Even I am not allowed to go out. Whose order is this? Lu Qingyan frowned, and a trace of sullenness appeared on her face. Why are you asking so many questions? All you need to know is that because of you, Senior Uncle Yujun and everyone else can only stay here and keep an eye on you. Do you think we don't want to go to the Golden Sky world? Zhan Bing said impatiently. Lu Qingyan glanced at Yujun and others. Seeing their indifferent expressions, she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. These were her fellow disciples and elders. Well, you'd better be sensible and stay in the courtyard with Junior Sister Qingyan. Otherwise, don't blame Heavenly Sound Pavilion for not considering the old friendship of you family. Zhan Bing glanced at Lin Sun disdainfully and issued a warning. Ha! Lin Sun suddenly slapped Zhan Bing in the face, causing the latter to stagger and fall to the ground with a thump. He let out a blood-curdling scream as blood spurted from his mouth and nose. His entire face was red and swollen. Everyone was stunned. It was beyond their expectation that Lin Sun, who was regarded as insignificant by them, dared to take action. In particular, Yujun's expression darkened. A Saint King actually dared to bully the successor of his own sect right in front of him. This was a complete provocation. Lu Qingyan's eyes widened in surprise. In her impression, this senior Yuxian had always been patient and low-key. Why would he suddenly flip out? At this moment, Lin Sun said coldly, "Trash? How can a junior like you wantonly humiliate a member of my Imperial Clansy clan? Kill me if you dare. I'd like to see how your heavenly music pavilion will give my Yu clan an explanation. These words made Yu Jun, who was about to capture Lin Sun, stagnate, and his face was cloudy and uncertain. If they really fell out, Yu Jun was not afraid. The only thing he was worried about was that Liang Chuan, the Supreme Elder, had just said a few days ago that internal strife was not allowed. If they attacked Yu Xian, Liang Chuan would definitely believe that they were targeting Lu Qinyan, which was an internal strife. How dare you hit me? Zhan Bing got up, his face full of anger and disbelief. Pa! Lin Sun slapped him again. The slap was crisp. Zhan Bing let out a scream, fell to the ground, and fainted. Zhan Bing was a peerless great saint, but he was slapped unconscious. It could be imagined how strong Lin Sun was. You're courting death. Yu Jun was completely furious. Although the slap was on Zhan Bing's face, it also made him feel humiliated, as if he had been provoked. But when he was about to take action, he suddenly noticed that Elder Liang Chuan had appeared not far away, with a touch of coldness and disgust on his youthful face. Don't I mean what I said? Liang Chuan said indifferently. Yu Jun's body was stiff, and he explained, Uncle, you probably saw that Yu Xian hurt Zhan Bing. How can I sit back and watch? I just asked, do I mean what I said? Liang Chuan's disgust became more and more intense. He was obsessed with cultivation, and what he hated most was to deal with such trivial and dirty things. Yu Jun's face changed for a while, and then he bowed his head and said, Uncle, you're right. Humph. If it happens again, don't blame me for being rude. Liang Chuan turned around and left. From beginning to end, he ignored Lu Qinyan and Lin Sun. This also proved that he'd merely come here to defend the orders and will that he'd given, and not to uphold justice for the two of them. Lin Sun had been watching coldly, and he had a panoramic view of Liang Chuan's attitude. Forget it. Taking a deep breath, Yu Jun let out a long sigh and said, Just now, Marshal Uncle Liang Chuan was right. Qingyan, if you and Yu Xian want to go to the Golden Heaven Great World, you could go ahead. After that, he turned away with the crowd and the unconscious Zhan Bing. This support boat is already equivalent to a cage for you, and it's an opportunity to spread your wings and fly high before you. Do you want to leave? Lin Sun looked at Lu Qinyan. If Lu Qinyan was determined to leave, he would definitely help her. Unexpectedly, Lu Qinyan shook her head and turned into the courtyard. Senior, if we really go to the Golden Heaven world, do you believe that they will definitely capture me as soon as possible? And you, I'm afraid you will be killed by them. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. At the foot of the guest mountain, after waiting for a long time, Lin Sun and Lu Qinyan didn't show up, which made Yu Jun frown, and his face became gloomy. That little bitch didn't fall for it. As Lu Qinyan had speculated, it was impossible for Yu Jun to be so kind as to watch them leave the boat. The only purpose of this was to take the opportunity to kill Lin Sun and capture Lu Qinyan in the Golden Heaven world. Uncle, are you going to let go? Zhan Bing had woken up, but his face was red and swollen like a pig's head. What else can you do? Do you want to try the means of Grand Elder Liang Chuan? With that, Yu Jun turned around and left. Zhan Bing panicked and hurriedly chased after him. Without Yu Jun, he had no confidence to challenge Yu Xian, the king of sages. These idiots are lucky. If that guy really goes to the Golden Heaven world, these idiots won't even know how they die. The teenager in linen, who had been lying on the wall and watching the scene, muttered to himself. After that, he let out a long sigh. What a pity. White Emperor City, the place where White Emperor proved his Tao. It said that there are 36 pictures of White Emperor's Tao-cutting sword on the city wall, which contain the supreme mystery of swordsmanship. I don't know whether it's true or not. The old woman stood in the courtyard and looked at the teenager with a smile. She also thought of White Emperor City. However, she didn't think the same as the teenager. The primordial White Monarch was indeed an incredible figure. But for countless years, the Jintian clan had never produced a figure that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the primordial White Monarch. Especially among the young people of the Jintian clan, only a few of them could be regarded as great talents. As for White Emperor City, It had been a long time since there was a city lord who could be respected by the world like White Emperor. Of course, this was the old woman's opinion. In the White Emperor Star area, and even in the entire Starry Sky ancient path, the Jintian clan was still a giant that couldn't be underestimated. Lin Sun also felt a little regretful that he couldn't go to White Emperor City. The primeval age could be said to be the golden age of cultivation. At that time, many Emperor Realm existences that could shake the ages were born. White Emperor was one of them. White Emperor City was regarded as one of the 6 ancient cities in the Starry Sky, and it was built by White Emperor himself. How extraordinary was that place? 3 days later, the cultivators who went to the Golden Sky world, whether they were here for trade or for sightseeing, all returned. At the same time, there was another group of guests on the support boat. They were going to take the boat to the Hongmeng world. When the support boat left the Golden Sky world and sailed into the Starry Sky, there was news. Some of the top figures of the younger generation of the Jintian clan also appeared on the support boat. They were going to the Hongmeng world. For a moment, all the cultivators on the support boat were shocked. The Jintian clan was the descendant of the White Emperor. It was said that in order to receive the distinguished guests from the Jintian clan, the Heavenly Music Parlor had specially vacated a group of courtyards on the guest mountain. It was said that among the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, there was a peerless beauty named Jintian Xinhue. She had cultivated for 180 years and had already stepped into the Saint King stage. She was ranked 49th on the All Heavens King Sage board. She was graceful, with fairy-like skin and jade-like bones. She was like a proud daughter of heaven. It was said that the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan were going to the Hongmeng world to participate in a Dao discussion event jointly organized by the 6 Dao courts. It was said that all kinds of news about the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan emerged like mushrooms after the rain that night, causing countless discussions and exclamations. In addition to the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, there were other cultivators who boarded the ship this time. However, compared to the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, they did not attract much attention. Only Lin Sun found something unusual. Amongst those cultivators was a group of monks who wore bamboo hats, coarse linen clothes, and walked barefooted. The aura of these monks made Lin Sun vaguely smell something unusual. It was the aura of the descendants of the Hidden Land realm, one of the 3 dark magnates. Even if they did not wear black monk robes, even if they claimed to be from a Buddhist orthodoxy called the Jade Zen Temple, they still could not hide it from Lin Sun. He was too familiar with the aura of the descendants of the Hidden Land realm. He, who had cultivated the Tranquility Scripture, could clearly capture this unique aura. Could it be that these bald donkeys of the Hidden Land realm have already noticed my traces? Chapter 1918. These monks, who called themselves Jade Zen Temple, were arranged to live in a courtyard at the foot of the guest mountain. Usually, they were rarely seen going out, which made them low-key and mysterious. On the contrary, the disciples from the Jintian family were very active. They often went out together and played in the busy market. However, no one was able to see the beautiful and famous Golden Sky mystic moon. It was said that as soon as she boarded the ship, she practiced hard in the courtyard alone. An old servant guarded in front of the courtyard to prevent anyone from approaching. Clatter in the courtyard where Lin Sun and Lu Qingyan lived. The star's Tao restriction ran instantly with a burst of restriction power, isolating the outside world. In the courtyard, Lin Sun, who was sitting cross-legged, took a deep breath, and his body was covered with bright and blazing green light. Dong, dong, dong. Within the divine palace of his liver, the greenwood divine fetus produced a vibration that sounded like the beating of a divine drum. The vitality that was so dense that it seemed material erupted like a volcano, and there were faintly strands of the sound of the Tao surging as if ancient sages were reading scriptures. This situation lasted for 4 hours. Later, with a sound like the beginning of chaos, a handful of green light rain suddenly rushed out of the spiritual platform above Lin Sun's head. The light rain was flowing, and the vitality was boiling. It gathered together and condensed into a green figure, which seemed to be made of the purest green glazed jade in the world, crystal clear and floating with Tao light. When the brilliance faded, a Dharmakaya floated to the ground. He was dressed in a green robe, with black hair fluttering. His facial features were clear and elegant, and his figure was tall and dignified, exuding a transcendent spirit. Looking carefully, this Dharmakaya looked exactly the same as Lin Sun, but its spirit showed a pure and vigorous spirit of Greenwood. Greenwood Taoist body, a doppelganger of Tao bred by the divine fetus of Greenwood. Lin Sun raised his head and looked at Greenwood Taoist body. When their eyes met, Lin Sun had a feeling of blood and water blending together. It was as if the Taoist body was a part of his body. As long as he thought about it, he could make the Taoist body work for him. This was the realm of 5 flavors in the yellow court scripture. The 5 divine fetus bred and the 5 internal organs would break out of the shell and have their own flavors. The 5 hidden realms contain vitality. The 5 color realm possessed the appearance. For example, the Greenwood divine embryo would display the appearance of everlasting green and everlasting vitality. The 5 flavors realm allowed the Greenwood Taoist body to have the charm of the great Tao. If one cultivated to the 5 virtues realm, the 5 clones would have their own divine sense and cultivation. At present, Lin Sun had just broken through the 5 taste realm and condensed the first doppelganger, Greenwood Taoist body. It was just a Taoist body without his own spiritual awareness and cultivation. Even so, it was enough for Lin Sun. With a single thought, Yi Futian's body trembled. Rumble, his primordial spirit, essence, qi, spirit, and Tao all surged out and fused into the body of the Greenwood sect. As for his original body, it appeared to be in a sleeping state. What a powerful Greenwood power! In an instant, Lin Sun felt all kinds of mysteries of the Greenwood Taoist body, and many insights emerged in his mind. Wood was one of the 5 elements, and it controlled the vitality of heaven and earth. It was extremely miraculous. In the Great Way Yellow Court Scripture, Senior Brother Gyupu had specially explained that once the Greenwood Taoist body was formed, the body would be like the sky, and the power of life and death could be controlled. Lin Sun silently comprehended for a long time, and suddenly snapped his fingers. Around his feet, clear lotuses suddenly emerged, full of vitality and swaying. The stems and veins of the leaves were surrounded by wonderful Taoist patterns. The abundant and rich aura of green would spread in an instant. With a thought in Lin Sun's mind, thousands of clear lotuses instantly turned into withered lotus leaves, and their vitality was lost, as if they were robbed by a strong force. Soon, they all turned into ashes and scattered in the air. This was the power of life and death controlled by the Greenwood Taoist body. If it was used in battle, with a press of a finger, the enemy's vitality would be plundered, and their life would wither like a plant. Similarly, if it was used to save people, it could also achieve the magical effect of life and death. The rarest thing was that this was the innate talent of the Greenwood Taoist body, which could perfectly match with Lin Sun's cultivation. Having the Greenwood Taoist body is equivalent to giving me another body, but this body has the magical talent of the Great Way. Lin Sun's black eyes were bright, and he couldn't help but marvel in his heart. The Great Way Yellow Court Scripture created by Gyupu was simply amazing and ingenious. This was only the first Greenwood Taoist body, but it already had such a magical power. If the other 4 doppelgangers were condensed one by one, wouldn't it be possible to master 4 completely different kinds of magical powers? If he cultivated to the 5 virtues realm and let these 5 doppelgangers master the spiritual awareness and cultivation, how powerful would they be? After a long time, Lin Sun withdrew the star's forbidden formation. At this time, Lu Qingyin came out of the room and asked with a little doubt, "Senior, why do I feel that you seem to be a different person?" Lin Sun's previous practice was deliberately covered by him, so even though they were in the same courtyard, Lu Qingyin didn't notice it at all. There is a slight breakthrough in cultivation. Lin Sun gave a reason with a smile. His original body had already been put away, and what appeared was actually the greenwood Taoist body. However, this kind of change in charm, appearance, and charm was difficult for ordinary people to perceive at all. I see. Lu Qingyan suddenly understood, but she still looked at Lin Sun with a trace of doubt in her eyes. How could a breakthrough in cultivation change a person's charm? At the same time, at the foot of the guest mountain, in a courtyard, a young monk sitting in the lotus position, holding prayer beads in his hand and meditating quietly, suddenly frowned. He opened his eyes and was shocked in his heart. Why did the breath of the heretic suddenly disappear? He stood up and walked out of the room. In the courtyard, a group of barefooted monks in linen clothes and bamboo hats were sitting on futons, meditating and meditating. Each of their breaths was as deep as the sea, obscure and silent. However, when they saw the young monk coming out, they all stood up and saluted him solemnly. Greetings, Abbot Wuming. Everyone's expressions were filled with sincerity and sincerity. In the hidden land realm, there were many adversity travelers and arhats adversity, but there were only 9 Abbot adversity. Wuming was one of them. Abbot adversity was regarded as the core successor of the supreme inheritance of the hidden land realm. Each of them had a transcendent status and unfathomable cultivation. Even some old monsters would show great respect in front of Abbot adversity. Wuming just nodded and walked out of the courtyard. Outside the courtyard, a skinny old monk wearing a bamboo hat sat on the ground. He had no breath at all, like a stone, inconspicuous. But Wuming bowed and said, "Uncle Du Kong, something went wrong. The Chakravarti beads in my hand can't sense the breath of the heretic." The Chakravarti beads was a kind of magical treasure. With this beads, any heretic who was targeted by the hidden land realm, no matter where he was, could be detected by the warriors of the hidden land realm through a secret method. The emaciated old monk called Du Kong opened his eyes, and a wisp of a bright light suffused his muddy gaze as he said, "We'd already locked onto the heretic when we arrived here. That heretic is on this ship, and I've been constantly assuming command here during this period of time. I didn't notice anyone leaving this ship." Wuming said thoughtfully, "So, the heretic should have noticed our arrival. So he used a method that can hide his breath to block the Chakravarti beads detection." Du Kong nodded and said, "Wuming, don't be careless. Don't forget that some time ago, outside the Diyu realm, Buddha Lord Lianshan and dozens of arhats adversity had already locked the breath of the heretic. But in the end, they were all killed. Buddha Lord Lianshan, a figure in the emperor realm of the hidden land realm. Of course, Wuming also knew about this. It was said that Buddha Lord Lianshan was killed by a pink flying sword that pierced through the middle of his eyebrows. This incident caused a great commotion in the hidden land realm. Based on this, we can tell that there must be a big shot protecting this man. This time, the sect sent me here to be your path protector to find out the cause of Buddha Lord Lianshan's death." Du Kong's voice was hoarse. "But until now, I haven't caught any unusual breath. I can only vaguely tell that there are at least 2 figures in the Emperor realm on this ship. One should be an old man from the Jintian clan, an imperial family. He is guarding in front of the courtyard of the woman called Tian Xianwei. The other one is also on this guest mountain. She is an old woman who has changed her appearance. She is accompanied by a young man. If you count me in, there are 3 Emperor realm experts. But I can't be sure if there are more of them in the dark." Hearing this, Wuming's heart skipped a beat. He said, "Uncle, are they also here for the heretic?" Du Kong was about to say something. Silently, the figure of an old woman appeared out of thin air. She ignored Wuming directly and looked at Du Kong. Her voice was cold. "I don't care what the hidden land realm is here for, and I'm not interested to know. I'm here to tell you that I don't care about your business. But my young master is on a long trip. If anyone dares to plot against him, don't blame me for being impolite." The old woman's aura was overbearing. Du Kong was silent for a moment and said, "Okay." The old woman snorted and disappeared into thin air. She left as quickly as she came. Wuming's eyes were filled with coldness. "Uncle, is this old woman the existence in the Emperor realm?" Du Kong nodded. His cloudy eyes were surging with obscure dark Buddha light. That's good. At least it proves that the heretic has nothing to do with them. Wu Ming frowned. In fact, he was also shocked. An existence in the Emperor realm was personally escorting a young master. What was the identity of this young master? It was terrifying to think about it. Du Kong suddenly sighed and said in a low voice, "There are really hidden talents on this ship. Wu Ming, before I find traces of the heretic, I can't act rashly. You can only rely on yourselves." Chapter 1919. Apart from the old woman, there was also an Emperor stage cultivator from the Imperial clan, Jin Tian, guarding the ship. This caused Du Kong to have some reservations. Before investigating the situation clearly, if he acted rashly, it would instead arouse the vigilance and resistance of these peers, and something unexpected might happen. Most importantly, if they found out about the heretic's identity, it was bound to cause a huge commotion. After all, the heretic held a supreme fortuitous encounter from the Kunlun ruins that was related to becoming an Emperor stage cultivator. On a mountainside of Guest Mountain, there was a waterfall, a spring, and a simple and elegant courtyard. In front of the courtyard, an old man in a cloth robe was holding a jug of wine and drinking by himself. Beside him stood a group of noble disciples from the Imperial clan, Jin Tian. All of them were dressed in embroidered clothes, and they were handsome and beautiful. They were extraordinary. In the eyes of outsiders, they were like stars in the sky, existences that could only be looked up to. They were extremely noble. However, at this moment, these young men and women were all respectful and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They restrained their pride and sharpness. The reason was that the old man in a cloth robe was their patriarch, an Emperor stage existence that had lived for countless years. In the entire White Emperor Star region, and even on the ancient path in the starry sky, the old man in a cloth robe was a famous figure. His name was Jin Tianhong, and he was known as the wind-supporting Sword Emperor. This isn't the Golden Sky world, nor is it the White Emperor Star region. All of you better restrain yourselves and don't cause trouble. The cloth-robed old man said casually, "I know very well what kind of people all of you are. If you're killed by others, then you only have yourself to blame. Even if all of you die, my heart won't ache. However, all of you are surnamed Jin Tian after all, and the blood of the Jin Tian clan flows in your veins. If all of you die, I can avenge you, but don't expect me to save you." His voice was calm, but it was not polite at all. His words even revealed a sense of ruthlessness and indifference. The group of men and women looked at each other. "Patriarch, it's just a boat. Could there be someone we can't afford to offend?" Someone could not help but ask. The old man glanced at this person, and it terrified the latter to the point his face turned ghastly pale, and he almost knelt on the ground while his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. The cloth-robed old man retracted his gaze and drank another cup of wine. "The Jin Tian clan is getting worse with each generation because there are too many useless people like you." As he said this, he smiled again. "Thankfully, the heavens have blessed us, allowing our Jin Tian clan to have a few more geniuses like Xianyu." His voice was filled with gratification. All the men and women present couldn't help but feel jealous. Golden Sky Black Moon. She was a member of the same generation that made them jealous and fearful. She had cultivated for 180 years and was ranked 49th on the All Heavens King Sage list. Even the elders in the clan could only lower their heads in front of her and sigh at their inferiority. "Go. Remember my words. You can stir up trouble, but don't blame anyone if you get killed. All I can do is avenge you." The cloth-robed elder waved his hand and dispersed the crowd. Not all of the juniors of the Jin Tian clan were useless. On the contrary, a few of them had already reached the peak of the Saint King stage. However, their temperaments were extremely unbearable. Some were arrogant, some were frivolous, and some even had evil intentions and committed all sorts of evil deeds. Towards these juniors, the cloth-robed elder only felt disdain and disdain. Only Golden Sky Black Moon and a few others could catch the eye of the cloth-robed elder. Therefore, when he heard that Golden Sky Black Moon was going to the Hongmeng world to participate in the Dao discussion gathering organized by the 6 major Dao courts, he personally accompanied her. The hidden land realm. The old lady, looks like there's more to this small boat than meets the eye. As the cloth-robed elder pondered, he drank another cup of wine. In the main hall of the heavenly music parlor, Liang Chuan's expression was unusually serious. He looked at the important figures of the heavenly music parlor and said in a deep voice, "It is an honor for the heavenly music parlor to have the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan travel on this boat. However, it is also a great pressure. From today onwards, no matter what requests these distinguished guests have, the heavenly music parlor will fulfill them as long as it is within our means. Do you all understand?" Everyone in the hall nodded in unison. A while ago, a group of cultivators from the Wilderness Dao court had just been killed. At this time, who would dare to offend a colossus like the Jintian clan? Liang Chuan nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. The journey to the Hongmeng world this time had so many twists and turns. This made Liang Chuan feel extremely pressured. Whether it was the Jintian clan, the old lady beside Little Nine, or the deaths of the cultivators from the Wilderness Dao court, they were all like mountains that weighed on Liang Chuan's heart. Even a quasi-emperor like him couldn't help but feel apprehensive. These are troubled times, Liang Chuan sighed inwardly. Young master, the Hidden Land Realm, and the Jintian clan are all on the boat. Don't you like to watch a good show? If there are no accidents, it won't be long before there will be some trouble. In the courtyard, the old lady said with a smile. The youth in linen was lying in the rocking chair in a daze. When he heard this, he jumped up and his eyes lit up. He said excitedly, "The Hidden Land Realm? Isn't that one of the 3 dark giants? I've long heard that they are secretive and ruthless, but I don't know whether it's true or not." He rubbed his palms together and spit flew everywhere. "And that monarch race, the Jintian clan. They are all descendants of the primordial white monarch. I have long wanted to see if their ancestral chaotic sword-shaking scripture is as powerful as the legends say." The old lady's smile suddenly froze. She had to remind him, "Young master, you can watch the show, but if you want to join in the fun, I won't agree." Her words, like a basin of cold water, made the youth in linen lose all his strength and collapse in the rocking chair like a dead fish. He sighed. "The cultivation of the great Tao is the way to subdue one's heart. If I don't temper myself, how can I achieve anything? Grandma, please take pity on me and give me a chance." But no matter how he begged, the old lady just wouldn't agree. The youth in linen scratched his ears and cheeks anxiously, but in the end, there was nothing he could do. "Miss Qing Yin, now on this boat, undercurrents are surging and the situation is treacherous. I'm worried that trouble will come to us," Lin Sun muttered. Lin Sun pondered. He suspected that the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm came for him, so he had to remind Lu Qingyin. "Trouble?" Lu Qingyin's watery eyes widened. Lin Sun nodded. "Yes, but it's just my feeling. It's hard to say whether it will happen or not. Anyway, you'd better be prepared." Lu Qingyin nodded. What Lin Sun and Lu Qingyin didn't expect was that trouble came to them that night. The night was as dark as ink. Yu Jun, the holy king of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, came in person. "Qingyin, the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, an imperial family, have heard that you have great attainments in music and would like to invite you to the Cloud Jade Pavilion." Lin Sun and Lu Qingyin frowned at his words. How could the people of the Jintian clan have heard of Lu Qingyin? Someone must have deliberately mentioned Lu Qingyin to arouse the interest of these distinguished guests of the Jintian clan. "I'm sorry, Miss Qingyin is in closed-door training and doesn't plan to go out recently." Lin Sun refused flatly. Yu Jun's face darkened. You are just a guard. What qualifications do you have to make decisions for the descendants of Heavenly Sound Pavilion?" Lin Sun said stiffly. "Qingyin said that my idea is her idea." Yu Jun's eyes were full of killing intent. "Yu Xian, you are really tired of living. I'm not afraid to tell you that if Qingyin doesn't go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion, the highest elder Liang Chuan will not care even if you were killed this time." At this time, Lu Qingyin walked out of the room and said, "Uncle, if you continue to force me like this, I will die immediately." Yu Jun was stunned. If Lu Qingyin died, how could he explain to Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court? He hurriedly said, "Qingyin, this time we invite you to go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion. We can't afford to offend those distinguished guests of the Jintian clan." Even the highest elder Liang Chuan said that we must not neglect and offend these distinguished guests. Lu Qingyin showed a look of disgust. "In order not to offend them, you are forcing me to go to the Cloud Jade Pavilion to meet them?" Yu Jun sighed. "Qingyin, because of you, many strong men of the primitive Taoist court have suffered, and our heavenly sound pavilion has also been implicated. Now, if we offend the Jintian clan because of you, the consequences, even your master Zhuang Yunji can't bear it." Lu Qingyin's face changed. She didn't care about anything else, but she had to care about her master Zhuang Yunji. "Qingyin, listen to me. There will be trouble if you go. It's better to stay here." Lin Sun said resolutely. "Yu Xian, you are really looking for death." Yu Jun was completely angry. The last time he came, he took it to heart because Lin Sun slapped Zhang Bing in front of him. Now, Lin Sun obstructed him like this, which made his inner anger and hatred burst out directly. A Saint King of the Yu family of the imperial family dared to oppose him like this. He was simply tired of living. But when he was about to take action, clatter, Lin Sun directly activated the star's forbidden formation, blocking Yu Jun outside the courtyard. Soon, Yu Jun's angry roar sounded outside the courtyard. "Yu Xian, quickly remove the formation, or I will tear you into pieces and grind your bones to ashes." He was flustered and exasperated. This boat was the territory of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, but now, a Saint King of the Yu family of the imperial family dared to oppose him like this. Lin Sun ignored all this, sat leisurely under the big tree in the courtyard, picked up the green wine gourd and drank. "Yu Xian, just you wait." After a long time, Yu Jun left angrily after uttering a harsh word. At this time, Lin Sun looked at Lu Qingyin and said, "Qingyin, are you afraid?" Lu Qingyin shook her head. I'm just a little worried about my master." Lin Sun said, "Don't worry, your master is a peerless Saint King. The Heavenly Sound Pavilion dare not do anything to her, but we—" Lu Qingyin's heart tightened, and she said, "Senior, I'm afraid I've implicated you again this time. What should we do?" Her voice was full of uncontrollable worry. Lin Sun smiled, looking calm and relaxed. Now, with the Greenwood Taoist body, even if he encountered trouble, he would not be afraid to reveal some of his strength. Chapter 1920. Emerald Cloud Pavilion. It was resplendent and magnificent. Wu Yunlian and the rest of the Heavenly Music Parlor's younger generation Qi practitioners sat respectfully with the guests from the monarch race, the Jintian clan, drinking and enjoying themselves. In the pavilion, the sound of stringed and bamboo instruments rang out. The wonderful music was like the sounds of nature, and there were also beautiful singers dancing lightly. Wu Yunlian had a proud smile on her face. Just now, when she was entertaining the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan, she deliberately mentioned that there was a descendant of the younger generation of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion named Lu Qingyin, who was as beautiful as a poem and as graceful as a painting. What was rare was that her attainments in music were superb. She could be called a fairy of the younger generation of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion. This naturally aroused the interest of the distinguished guests of the Jintian clan. So Wu Yunlian struck while the iron was hot and immediately invited Lu Qingyin to come. This bitch can't refuse this time. If she appears, it will not be so easy to leave. Wu Yunlian thought in her heart. She was jealous of Lu Qingyin, who was above her in appearance, temperament, and cultivation. The most intolerable thing was that Kong Yu, the descendant of the primitive Tao court, was originally regarded by her as the perfect Taoist companion. But who would have thought that Kong Yu fell in love with Lu Qingyin? This made Wu Yunlian's jealousy even stronger. She could not wait to destroy Lu Qingyin. Why hasn't Miss Qingyin come yet? Suddenly, a man in a silver robe spoke, frowning slightly. The lively atmosphere in the hall suddenly became stagnant. Many people turned to look at Wu Yunlian. Wu Yunlian's heart trembled, and she quickly said, "Young master, please calm down. I will send someone to urge them." The man in the silver robe was called Jin Tianqi, a pure blood descendant of the Jintian clan. His status was extremely noble, and the men and women of the Jintian clan around him all followed his lead. Wu Yunlian did not dare to slight such an esteemed guest. But before she could urge him, Yu Jun returned alone with a gloomy expression. "Martial uncle, where is junior sister Lu Qingyan?" Wu Yunlian asked. Yu Jun gritted his teeth and said she was blocked by Yu Xian. Yu Xian is so bold. Wu Yunlian slapped the table and stood up. Her eyes were cold. "Martial uncle, why didn't you do it?" The atmosphere in the hall was silent. The silver-robed man, Jin Tianqi, and the others all frowned. A successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion actually dared to refuse to meet with them? Yu Jun's expression changed indeterminately. "There's a restrictive formation set up in that courtyard, and even I can't see through it. That's why I didn't make a move immediately." Wu Yunlian's beautiful face was filled with frost. "This is our support boat, and he, Yu Xian, actually dared to do this without permission. This is simply preposterous. I don't care about Yu Xian. I just want to ask you, is it because our Jin Tian clan's face is not big enough to invite Lady Qingyan?" Jin Tianqi said unhappily, feeling a little annoyed. Just today, they, the Jin Tian clansmen, were reprimanded by their ancestor, Sword Emperor Fufeng. They didn't feel good about it. That was why they gathered at the Emerald Cloud Pavilion to drown their sorrows in wine. Who would have thought that they would encounter something like this, which made them very unhappy? It was fine that their ancestor reprimanded them, but a successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion dared to refuse to meet with them. It was clear that she didn't put them in her eyes. Hearing this, Wu Yunlian shivered all over and said quickly, "Martial Uncle Yu Jun, please go with me. No matter what means you use, you must invite junior sister Qingyan for me." She emphasized the word invite. Yu Jun also saw that Jin Tianqi and the other distinguished guests of the Jintian clan were very unhappy, so he didn't dare to neglect and hurried away. Wu Yunlian picked up a wine cup and showed a charming smile. "Come, let me toast you first. I hope you can calm down and don't lower yourself to the same level as junior sister Qingyan." Jin Tianqi looked indifferent. "If Lu Qingyan doesn't come, I won't drink this wine." The atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Wu Yunlian looked embarrassed, and her body was stiff. She was furious to the extreme. "Lu Qingyan, you bitch, when you come, you won't be able to bear the pain." Guest Mountain. Yu Jun led a group of people in a threatening manner. Along the way, they attracted the attention of countless gazes. The teenager in linen climbed up the wall excitedly and muttered, "The show is about to begin." The old woman smiled and ignored him. In another place, the old man in linen robe drank a cup of wine and seemed to be unaware of it. In front of the courtyard at the foot of the mountain, Du Kong closed his eyes and remained motionless from beginning to end. Old Du removed the spiritual qi restriction formation in this courtyard. When they arrived in front of Lin Sun's courtyard, Yu Jun immediately gave the order. The boat was covered in layers of restrictive formations, including every courtyard on the guest mountain. There were restrictions to replenish spiritual energy. Old Du was the elder of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion who was in charge of these spiritual qi restriction formations. Old Du, who was as thin as bamboo, took out a turtle shell-shaped formation plate and waved it gently. Buzz, with a roar, the restriction formation covering Lin Sun's courtyard was removed, leaving only the star's forbidden formation arranged by Lin Sun in operation. Yu Jun said in a deep voice, "Yu Xian, how long can your restriction formation run without the support of spiritual power? If you obediently cooperate now, I can spare your life. Otherwise, when I barge in, it will be the day of your death." His voice was cold and full of killing intent. However, no one in the courtyard responded. Lin Sun was drinking. Lu Qingyan was in a daze. Yu Jun's face became more and more gloomy. He took a deep breath and waved his hand. "Break this restriction formation for me." Boom. 7 or 8 Saint Kings of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, who came with Yu Jun, launched an attack without hesitation. But all the attacks were dissolved and dissipated by the power of the restriction formation like a clay ox entering the sea. Yu Jun's pupils shrank. Only then did he realize that this restriction formation was not as simple as he thought. Go on, do your best, he bellowed. If he didn't take Lu Qingyan to the Emerald Cloud Pavilion as soon as possible, who could bear the anger of those distinguished guests of Jin Tian family? Boom, boom, boom. All kinds of treasures and Taoist magic bombarded the restriction formation like a tide, producing a deafening roar. The noise had already alarmed the guests living in different parts of the guest mountain, who all sent their divine senses to this side. Aha! That restriction formation has the power of defense and binding. Even an emperor-to-be can't break it in a short time. These idiots are really too stupid. The young man in linen, who was watching from the top of the wall, laughed happily. At the same time, Lu Qingyan couldn't help but worry. Senior, if we continue like this, it will cause too much noise. It will be tantamount to completely offending the heavenly sound pavilion. Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "That's true." He stood up and waved his sleeves. An obvious flaw appeared in the star's restriction formation. After doing all this, Lin Sun clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Let's invite them into the trap first, and then close the door to beat the dog. The noise will not be so big." "It's open." Outside the courtyard, someone exclaimed in surprise. Yu Jun waved his hand, his killing intent soaring. "Rush in and kill Yu Xian. Let's go." All the Saint Kings of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion rushed in together. When he saw Lin Sun standing in the courtyard, a grim smile appeared on Yu Jun's face, and he said, "Take Qingyan to the Emerald Cloud Pavilion. I'll deal with this bastard." As he spoke, Yu Jun did not hesitate to take action. This time, he was really angry and mad. Yu Xian was just a Saint King, but he dared to oppose him again and again. Did he really think that with the support of the Yu family, he could be lawless? Naive, childish, ridiculous. This time, he would let him see what it meant to be torn into pieces and what it meant to be smashed into ashes. Boom! Yu Jun's big hand shot out like a heavy mountain. The sound of Tao rumbled, and the divine light surged. They didn't notice that the star's restriction formation, which they thought had been broken, had been restored to its original state. At the same time, other Saint Kings walked towards Lu Qingyan with a posture that said, "If you dare to resist, don't blame us for being rude." However, in this dangerous situation, Lu Qingyan seemed to be unaware of it. Her mind was completely attracted by the situation on Lin Sun's side. When she saw Yu Jun take action, she was so nervous that she held her breath. Elder Yu Jun was a veritable Saint King. What could Yu Xian use to fight against him? But the next moment, an incredible scene appeared. Lin Sun suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed in the air. Not only was Yu Jun's palm force broken, it turned into a rain of light. Yu Jun's whole body was grasped like a chicken. The saint rulers were all shocked by this unexpected scene. They stopped and were filled with disbelief. Yu Jun was stunned. His mind was blank, and there was only one thought in his mind. Was this the power of Saint King? I've tolerated enough, but you provoke me again and again. Are you in such a hurry to die? Lin Sun sighed. There was a sense of helplessness in this sentence. What are you doing? Let go of Elder Yu Jun. This is the Fuyusha boat, the territory of the Heavenly Sound School. Someone shouted. Bang! Yu Jun also wanted to speak, but before he could speak, Lin Sun exerted force with his palm. The terrible power was like a landslide and a tsunami, robbing Yu Jun's body of vitality. One could see with the naked eye that his body shriveled up and quickly turned into ashes that drifted away. Greenwood Taoist body, the power of life and death. An ultimate Sage King was wiped out just like that. The other Saint Kings were frightened, their faces pale. Yu Xian had been regarded as a worthless waste since he boarded the boat. No one had expected that under his cultivation of Saint King, there was such a terrible power. Who on earth was he? Lu Qingyan was also stunned. Everyone, Yu Xian, have always been honest and dutiful since I boarded the boat. Why do you always look down on and target me? Lin Sun looked at those Saint Kings, his eyes deep like an unfathomable abyss. Run! Those Saint Kings shivered and wanted to escape without hesitation. They were indeed frightened. Yu Jun was a Saint King, but he was killed in the blink of an eye. How terrifying was that? How could Lin Sun let them escape again? His figure flickered, and he moved casually without a trace of anger. But in just a few blinks of an eye, these 7 or 8 Saint King elders of the Heavenly Sound School were all killed on the spot. Each of their vitality was taken away and turned into withered ashes, making Lin Sun look like a god in charge of life and death. Chapter 1921. A series of clanking sounds rang out. Scattered holy treasures and storage treasures fell on the ground, shining brightly. All the big shots of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, including Yu Jun, were turned into ashes and disappeared from the world. Witnessing this scene, Lu Qingyan was stunned for a while before she suddenly raised her head. Her clear eyes were full of shock. She asked, "Senior, who are you?" Lin Sun knew that Lu Qingyan must be suspicious. He suddenly felt a headache and said, "Miss Qingyan, I just never intended to expose my strength." Lu Qingyan shook her head. "My master said that Senior Yu Xian from the Yu family is only at the Saint King realm. It's impossible for him to kill the Holy King as easily as you did." Speaking of this, she seemed to think of something and couldn't help saying, "The strongmen of primitive Tao court who were killed a few days ago are the," without waiting for her to finish. Lin Sun said frankly, "Yes, it's me." Lu Qingyan was in a trance and said, "If you were really Yu Xian, how could you have the courage to kill the strongmen of the primitive Taoist court? What's more, the real Yu Xian would not have done such a shocking thing for me," she murmured, trying to calm herself down, but she couldn't calm down because of the shock. "Miss Qingyan, you only need to know that I will never hurt you." Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He had vaguely realized that Lu Qingyan should have guessed some of the truth. "Okay." After a long time, Lu Qingyan nodded and stared at Lin Sun with a pair of bright and clear eyes. "Senior, I trust you." Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "That's good." Thinking of the scene just now, Lu Qingyan was worried and said, "Senior, you have killed so many people of Heavenly Sound Pavilion. What should we do next?" "Counter soldiers with arms and water with earth," Lin Sun said calmly. Anyway, they had already fallen out. It was nothing more than a fight. On the wall in the distance, the teenager in linen sighed with emotion. "I have seen people die, but I have never seen one so eager to die." He seemed to have already guessed the ending. Immediately, the teenager couldn't help but laugh gloatingly. "Well, now you are exposed, buddy. Doesn't this mean that the good show has just begun?" Time passed. The atmosphere in the Emerald Cloud Pavilion grew more and more oppressive. After Yu Jun left, Jin Tianqi and the other Jin Tian clansmen's faces turned gloomy and gloomy after a long time. Was this how the Heavenly Music Parlor treated its guests? Too much. Wu Yunlian, on the other hand, was like an ant on a hot pan. She was restless and grumbling in her heart. It was just dealing with a Saint King, yet it took so much time. Seeing the expressions of Jin Tianqi and the others becoming more and more unsightly, Wu Yunlian could not help but become nervous. "Senior Marshal Sister Wu, it's bad." After Marshal Uncle Yu Jun and the others entered Junior Marshal Sister Qingyan's courtyard, they haven't come out. Suddenly, a descendant of the Heavenly Music Pavilion rushed over. He was sweating profusely and had a panicked expression. I suspect they might have encountered some unforeseen event. "What?" Wu Yunlian suddenly stood up. Her expression was gloomy and uncertain. "Huh!" A member of the Jin Tian clan smashed the wine glass in his hand and sneered gloomily. "Lu Qingyan, we just want to see her, but she made so many twists and turns. She obviously looks down on us." Wu Yunlian and the other successors of the Heavenly Music Pavilion couldn't help but panic and stood up. "Everyone," just as Wu Yunlian was about to say something, she was interrupted by Jin Tianqi. He said coldly, "Our ancestor just said today that we shouldn't make trouble, so I don't want to argue with you. But you must hand over Lu Qingyan to me. Yes, this bitch is so shameless. If we don't teach her a lesson, how can we, the Jin Tian clan, put our face?" Immediately, Other members of the Jintian clan spoke with gloomy faces. In the great golden sky world, who dared to be disrespectful to them? Who had the guts to slight them? But now, a descendant of the heavenly music pavilion dared to not give them face. In fact, the most important thing was that they were in a bad mood today. They were just taking the opportunity to vent their emotions. Where's Lu Qingyan? Since she didn't come, how about we go and see her in person? Jin Tianqi stared coldly at Wu Yunlian. Wu Yunlian's pretty face was pale, and she felt cold all over. If Lu Qingyan fell into the hands of Jin Tianqi, she would definitely not end well. Although Wu Yunlian wanted Lu Qingyan to die, she knew that once Lu Qingyan died, no one would be able to pass Kong Yu's test. She took a deep breath and explained in a low voice, "Young master, Lu Qingyan's identity is not simple. She is the lover of Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court. If anything happens to her, it would have been better if these words hadn't been spoken. But as soon as they were spoken, it caused Jin Tianqi and the others to be infuriated, and their expressions were extremely unsightly." "What do you mean? Are you using Kong Yu to suppress us?" Jin Tianqi's face was livid. Of course, they knew that Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court was a direct descendant of the Imperial Kong clan, but how could the Jin Tian clan be afraid of him? Wu Yunlian was like being struck by lightning. "I'll give you a chance. Take us to see Lu Qingyan." Jin Tianqi gave an order, leaving no room for doubt. The night was as dark as ink, and the streets were noisy. Wu Yunlian led a group of angry Jin Tian clansmen to the guest mountain. This scene could not be concealed at all and was noticed by many people. "Have you heard that Lu Qingyan, the successor of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, refused to meet the Jin Tian clansmen and completely angered them? I'm afraid something big is going to happen. The Heavenly Sound Pavilion is too unlucky. Not long ago, the experts of the primitive Taoist court died, and even Hua Dian, a quasi-emperor, could only kneel down and beg for mercy. Now they have provoked the Jin Tian clan, an imperial clan. Lu Qingyan, this is a famous fairy in the Ziheng star field. I heard that because she offended Kong Yu of the primitive Taoist court, she was given the cold shoulder and suppressed by the Heavenly Sound Pavilion." On the rocking boat, many voices of discussion rang out. On one of the streets, there was a stall. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with dark skin, like a farmer. On the stall, there were all kinds of seeds, as well as a rusty hoe. A man in a luxurious robe passed by and curiously squatted in front of the stall and pointed to a thumb-sized black seed and said, "How many doctrine gems does this little thing cost?" The middle-aged man, who looked like a farmer, raised his eyelids and revealed a simple and honest smile. "Not expensive, 800,000 doctrine gems." The man in the luxurious robe was stunned and asked in astonishment, "How much?" The middle-aged man said seriously, 800,000 doctrine gems. "Not expensive. Do you think I'm an idiot?" The man in the luxurious robe spat fiercely and flicked his sleeves and left. The middle-aged man smiled and did not mind. This was the seed of a true Tao essence fruit. Not to mention 800,000 doctrine gems. Even if it was 8 million doctrine gems, countless cultivators would fight for it. Unfortunately, there were too few people in this world who knew what was good for them. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man looked at the guest mountain in the distance and murmured to himself, "How many people on that mountain know what is good for them?" When Jin Tianqi and the others, led by Wu Yunlian, walked up the guest mountain, the old monk, Du Kong, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the courtyard, had a smile on his lips. This kind of situation indeed required the appearance of some troublemakers. Perhaps this was the only way to lure the heretic out? Halfway up the mountain, the old man in a linen robe, who was lying on a wooden chair and pretending to sleep, snorted coldly from his nostrils. This group of good-for-nothings. The young man in linen robe, who was lying on top of the wall, was instantly amused when he saw this scene. He waved his hand and said, "You know that there's a tiger on the mountain, but you still want to go there. Brothers, have a good trip." Jin Tianqi and the others frowned and snorted coldly, feeling a little annoyed. But in the end, they still held it in. They had already heard that a quasi-emperor realm elder of the heavenly sound parlor had knelt in front of this courtyard, and the young man and the old woman who lived in this courtyard were very likely to belong to the kind of people who could not be provoked. This was precisely the reason why Jean Tianqi and the others had exercised forbearance. Otherwise, if it was at an ordinary time, they would have slapped that noisy linen-clothed young man to death. Seeing this, Wu Yunlian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She was really worried that Jean Tianqi and the others would go crazy and start a conflict with the young man in linen robe. If that happened, even if the gods fought, the mortals would suffer, and the heavenly sound parlor would also be implicated. Thinking about this, Wu Yunlian felt a pang of sadness. In the purple hung starfield, the heavenly sound parlor was the #1 orthodoxy. As the descendants, when had they ever suffered such grievances? But after leaving the purple-hung starfield, Wu Yunlian realized how vast the starry sky ancient path was, and how many powerful beings in this world could not be provoked. It's finally going to be lively. The young man in linen robe licked his lips excitedly. The Imperial clan, the Jintian clan, the primitive Dao court, the heavenly sound parlor. There are so many forces. How many would I dare to offend? You little brat, you just want to see the world in chaos. The old woman scolded with a smile, and then said solemnly, I'm warning you, that person will bear the consequences of his actions. Whether he lives or dies, it has nothing to do with you. I won't get involved either. The young man in linen robe said helplessly, I know. I can at least watch the show, right? The old woman nodded. Of course. At this time, Jean Tianqi and the others had come to the courtyard where Lin Sun was. Here? Jean Tianqi looked around. Yes. Wu Yunlian nodded. She felt bitter in her heart. Her only hope was that Liang Chuan and Hua Dian, the two elders, could come as soon as they heard the news. Otherwise, there would be a big mess here. Is Lu Qingyan here? Jean Tianqi asked in a deep voice. He had accumulated anger in his heart and had nowhere to vent it. Today, he was reprimanded by the old ancestor, and then refused by Lu Qingyan, a little successor of the heavenly sound parlor. How could he swallow this anger? What's the matter? Lin Sun's voice sounded in the courtyard. At the same time, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. This time, it was not the strong practitioners of the heavenly sound parlor. What's the matter? Jean Tianqi was completely annoyed and said coldly, Lu Qingyan doesn't want to see us. Can we come and see her? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. He had already guessed the identity of the other party, and he couldn't help but feel speechless. Chapter 1922. Lu Qingyan didn't want to see us, so we came to see her, okay? Even a fool would be able to sense the anger in his words. Wu Yunlian was anxious. If Lu Qingyan really bowed her head and came out to meet them, she would definitely be severely beaten by these playboys of the Jintian clan. It was hard to say whether she could live or not. Wu Yunlian didn't care about Lu Qingyan's life or death. What she cared about was how to explain to Kongyu if Lu Qingyan died. But to everyone's surprise, the gate of the courtyard was still closed in the face of Jean Tianqi and others who came to denounce them. Only Lin Sun's indifferent voice sounded no. These two words caused the expressions of Jean Tianqi and the others to freeze, and the flames of rage in their eyes seemed to be blazing. They had already come in person, but in the end, the door was shut in their face again. Who was the man who spoke? Jean Tianqi's voice was cold and piercing. Wu Yunlian hurriedly said, Yu Xian, an overmatch of the Yu clan of the Imperial clan, is now serving as the guard of Sister Qingyan. The Yu clan of the Imperial clan? Jean Tianqi sneered. It's just an ancient Imperial clan. How dare they make life difficult for us? They must be tired of living. The others also sneered. The Imperial clans were divided into the immemorial Imperial clan, the ancient Imperial clan, and the contemporary Imperial clan. And Jintian clan was the immemorial Imperial clan. In the eyes of these clansmen of the Jintian clan, they naturally despised and looked down on the Yu clan of the Imperial clan. A group of brainless playboys. How can the strength of an Imperial clan be measured by the length of its existence? The young man in linen sighed in his heart. As far as he knew, there were several behemoths among the contemporary imperial clans, which were not inferior to some immemorial imperial clans at all. That was to say, whether a force had a long history or not didn't mean that its power was necessarily stronger. But it's also true that the Jintian clan of the Imperial clan is an old immemorial Imperial clan, which a clan of the Imperial clan can't compete with. It's just that these fools are too blind, the young man in linen muttered. Yu Xian. Suddenly, Jin Tianqi shouted, I'll give you 3 breaths to think about it, before he finished. The closed gate of the courtyard opened, and Lin Sun walked out. Jin Tianqi and the others were first stunned, and then they couldn't help but start laughing while their eyes were filled with contempt. Look, didn't the experts of the Imperial clan, Yu clan, also obediently admit defeat? You're smart. Kneel down and wait here. When we see Lu Qingyan, we'll deal with you. A charming and beautiful woman spoke coldly and bossily. However, Lin Sun seemed to turn a deaf ear to them. He looked indifferent and glanced at the crowd, saying, If you kill the young ones, the old ones will definitely be restless. In this case, it should be okay to teach them a lesson, right? You dare to talk back? The charming woman raised her hand and slapped Lin Sun. Ha! The crisp sound of a slap resounded. However, the one who was slapped was the charming woman. Her face was red and swollen, and blood spurted out of her mouth and nose. She was sent flying and smashed into the ground. From the beginning to the end, no one saw clearly how Lin Sun moved. Jin Tianqi and the others were slightly stunned, and they revealed expressions of disbelief. This fellow actually dared to make a move in front of us? See, you saw it too. Not only do I dare to talk back, I also dare to fight back. Lin Sun's eyes were cold. Kill him. The charming woman screamed angrily. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was distorted. Boom! A strong young man took out a black heavy sword. The sword intent was like a mountain, crushing the void, and the power of law emerged. Lin Sun sighed in his heart and no longer hesitated. He didn't move, but there was a slap. The strong young man was slapped away as if he had been hit by a holy mountain. He screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He was even more miserable than the charming woman. His face was sunken, his teeth flew out, his head buzzed, and he saw stars. He almost fainted. Everyone couldn't help but gasp, and their faces changed abruptly. The strong young man was a peerless Saint King. Although he had just entered this realm, his combat power should not be underestimated. But now he had no time to dodge and was slapped away like a fly. Didn't you say that he was a Saint King? Jin Tianqi's face was gloomy, and his eyes flickered. Wu Yunlian also couldn't believe it, and then she cried out involuntarily, Uncle Yu Jun and others. Were they defeated by you? Lin Sun said lightly, They are not too stupid. This. Wu Yunlian was stunned. She didn't know this at all before. What about you? Do you retreat? Or do you want to be slapped in the face one by one? Lin Sun looked at Jin Tianqi and others with his dark eyes. Jin Tianqi and others' faces changed, and they were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. The old ancestor reprimanded them, and Lu Qingyan refused their invitation. Now, even a guard dared to act like a tyrant in front of them. In the past, when had they suffered such treatment? No, let's kill this bastard together. Jin Tianqi roared. Crack! As soon as his voice fell, he was slapped heavily in the face. His whole face was badly mutilated, and a bloody 5-finger palm print collapsed. Jin Tianqi let out a blood-curdling scream as his body tumbled out. Even he was no match for Lin Sun. Crack! 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 In the following time, crisp slaps sounded one after another, and the clansmen of the Jintian clan were sent flying one after another. They also tried to resist and attack with all their strength, but in front of Lin Sun, there were simply a group of vulnerable chickens and dogs, and were suppressed one by one. In the end, in front of the gate of the courtyard, miserable screams rang out incessantly, piercing the night sky. And on the ground, the clansmen of the Jintian clan, whose faces were like pig heads, disheveled hair, and mouths dripping blood, were extremely miserable. And all of this was over in merely an instant. Only Wu Yunlian was left standing there. Her face was pale, and her mind was blank from shock. She stood there in a daze. This was the distinguished guest of the Jin Tian clan. Yet, he was beaten up on the support boat. At the thought of this, Wu Yunlian's eyes darkened, and she even wanted to die. Lin Sun stepped forward and said softly, "There's one more thing I forgot to tell you. Yu Jun and others are all dead." Wu Yunlian's pupils suddenly dilated as if she was struck by lightning. She was so angry that she coughed up a mouthful of blood. "You? How dare you?" She couldn't believe it, and she was about to go crazy. Lin Sun looked up at the sky, then at the surroundings, and sighed. There's no other way. Keeping a low profile and enduring is fine, but it's all useless. Instead, I'll be seen as a coward by you all. Miss, do you think the current situation will allow me to continue enduring? Wu Yunlian was stunned, and her face was filled with confusion. She didn't understand. But Lin Sun had already answered. No, as long as Miss Qingyan is still on this ship, there will be more and more troubles. And I can't just watch her being wrong, so I have to make the first move. Wu Yunlian asked subconsciously, "Aren't you afraid of revenge?" Lin Sun revealed a mocking smile. "What do you think?" Wu Yunlian felt a bone-chilling coldness, as if the person standing in front of her wasn't a person, but a god of death, and it made her feel extreme fear. Who is it?" Lin Sun's voice became deeper. "I heard that in the heavenly sound parlor, you hate Miss Qingyan the most, but from today onwards, it's no longer important." Wu Yunlian shivered and screamed. "What do you want to do?" Before her voice died away, Lin Sun had put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't be afraid. I'm just helping you get rid of it." Clatter, silently. Wu Yunlian's body suddenly withered, and her vitality flowed away. She turned into a handful of ashes and scattered in the air. After doing all this, Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and looked at the distant night with deep eyes. He was waiting. During this period of time, he had been enduring and keeping a low profile. He thought that after killing the strong men of the primitive Taoist court, the heavenly sound parlor could restrain itself. But now he found that he was wrong. Blind forbearance could not solve the problem at all, nor could it help Lu Qingyan get rid of her trapped situation. Just like tonight, if it weren't for him, Lu Qingyan would have been persecuted by the playboys of the Jintian clan. "Get out of here." Lin Sun looked down and glanced at Jintian Qi and others lying on the ground. These people of the Jintian clan, who had suffered a great loss and great humiliation, all showed their hatred and got up to leave. Lin Sun ignored them. He knew that there must be old monsters in the Jintian clan, and they must have noticed what happened. The reason why Lin Sun didn't kill these people was very clear. He had already given face to the Jintian clan. If he didn't know what was good for them, he wouldn't be polite anymore. "Dude, you've pierced the sky." The young man in linen witnessed all this with a strange look in his eyes. "Pierced the sky? It's just a boat. It's not that exaggerated." Lin Sun said indifferently, "You'd better be less noisy later, otherwise the senior beside you will feel sorry for you." The young man in linen was stunned and said angrily, "Do you think I'm afraid of trouble?" Lin Sun asked, "If you're not afraid of trouble, why do you always lie on the wall and dare not go out?" The young man in linen was silent. His face was gloomy, and he seemed to be struggling in his heart. "Young master, don't be affected by his words. Your path is different from his. Don't embarrass yourself." The old woman suddenly appeared and comforted the young man in linen. Then, she glanced at Lin Sun coldly. "You are a smart man. You must have realized that you can't protect yourself. However, if you want to drag my young master into the water by this means, don't blame me for being rude." "Drag him into the water?" Lin Sun shook his head with a smile and said no more. The young man in linen looked up and was about to say something, but the old woman grabbed his clothes and took him into the yard. At the same time, her indifferent and cold voice sounded in Lin Sun's ears. "Young man, it's kind enough for my young master to take the blame for you once. If you push your luck again, you will be overestimating yourself." Chapter 1923. Hearing this, Lin Sun looked indifferent. The old woman was not a bad person. She just strictly abided by her duty to look after the young man in linen. Lin Sun could understand that. Even if he was warned, he had no grievances. But what made Lin Sun a little unhappy was that she had to take the blame for him. He had never made such a request. What was more, what was too much? Lin Sun had no intention of dragging the young man into the water to shelter him from the wind and rain, even though he was in imminent danger. However, Lin Sun didn't bother to explain. With the status and realm of the old woman, it was impossible for her to believe these explanations. In the final analysis, Lin Sun was not important enough in her eyes. The night wind was blowing. On the guest mountain, Lin Sun waited silently. In the courtyard, Lu Qingyan sat alone. She took out the ancient rhythm ocarina, put it to her red and moist lips, and gently played a vast, vigorous, and distant note. Things had come to this. Her heart was completely calm, and she didn't care about life and death. This place was quiet, without any disturbances. But the guest mountain had been stared at by many people. The scene where Jin Tianqi and others were beaten and Wu Yunlian was killed had already shocked many people. I didn't expect that there was such a ruthless person living there. He killed the people of Tianyin Pavilion and suppressed a group of Jintian clansmen. No one can match his courage. But because of this, I'm afraid he won't survive tonight. Didn't you see that? He clearly knows that a disaster is coming and is waiting to die. All kinds of comments were heard in the dark. Uncle, let's go and have a look. At the foot of the mountain, Wu Ming, a young monk in a bamboo hat and linen robe, walked out of the courtyard with a group of descendants of the hidden land realm. Go. This boy is very likely to be the heretic. If so, we must not let him be killed by others. Sitting cross-legged in front of the courtyard, Monk Dukong said in a hoarse voice. Wu Ming nodded. The group of people went up the mountain under the cover of the night. For a moment, they attracted a lot of attention. Why did these monks from the Jade Zen Temple take the lead? Something is wrong. No matter what the discussion was, Wu Ming and his companions seemed to be unaware of it. They looked calm and deep. To think that I didn't beat you all to death. Halfway up the mountain, the cloth-robed elder revealed an undisguised sneer. Jin Tianqi and the others knelt on the ground while their expressions changed indeterminately, and they were extremely embarrassed and furious in their hearts. Ancestor, we're useless. Jin Tianqi kowtowed and gritted his teeth. But that fellow knew that we were from the Jintian clan, yet he didn't show any courtesy. He clearly didn't put us in his eyes. The cloth-robed elder sneered. You want to incite me to avenge you? Jin Tianqi's expression froze, but he braced himself and said, Ancestor, it doesn't matter if we lose face, but the Jintian clan's face cannot be lost. Bang! Jin Tianqi's body trembled as the tendons and bones in his body suddenly broke apart, and his entire body fell limply to the ground while his entire body twitched without end from the intense pain. The others were astounded and felt even more terrified. The cloth-robed old man said coldly, If it wasn't for all of you being too useless and useless, how could such a thing have happened? Don't you think it's too late for you to realize that you can't lose face for the clan now? Ancestor, they may be a little stupid, but they are right. The Jintian clan's face will be regained wherever it was lost. All of a sudden, a cold voice sounded. Behind the cloth-robed elder, the closed door of the courtyard opened, and out walked an extremely tall and beautiful woman. She was graceful and had a flawless physique. Jin Tianxianyu, the most dazzling genius among the younger generation of the monarch clan, the Jintian clan. She had cultivated for 180 years and was ranked 49th on the Heaven's Saint King board. She was famous throughout the entire galaxy ancient path, admired by countless cultivators. Jin Tianqi and the others had a complicated expression on their faces as they watched her walk out. They were both jealous and respectful of Jin Tianxianyu. The cloth-robed elder's expression softened, and he said, Xianyu, you've broken through? Jin Tianxianyu nodded. Even in front of the cloth-robed elder, she maintained her cold demeanor. Reporting to the ancestor, I have entered the Peak Saint King realm and formed a complete Dao domain. The cloth-robed elder's eyes lit up, and he praised, Good! Ancestor, I'm going to see you, Xian. Jin Tian Xianyu said in a cold voice. I'll take this opportunity to test my strength after breaking through, but I'll see if he's qualified to be my whetstone. The cloth-robed elder smiled. Go ahead. His attitude towards Jin Tian Xianyue, Jin Tianqi, and the others was completely different, and it was like the difference between heaven and earth. This made Jin Tianqi and the others even more jealous. But at the same time, they were relieved. With Jin Tian Xianyu's help, Yu Xianyu would definitely die. At least, he could save some face for them. Jin Tian Xianyu nodded, and then she floated away. When Jin Tian Xianyu appeared, everyone was shocked at this moment. The fairy of the Jin Tian clan finally appeared. Countless people were excited, as if they were witnessing a legend walking in the world. It was too rare and too rare. Obviously, she was going to save face for the Jin Tian clan, the monarch clan. On the guest mountain, all eyes were focused on the same place, the place where Lin Sun stood. The undercurrent was surging, and the killing intent was spreading. But to everyone's surprise, someone arrived before Wu Ming and Jin Tian Xianyu. Swish! The void rippled, and a thin figure appeared out of thin air. His hair was as white as snow, and he looked like a teenager. It was Liang Chuan, the supreme elder of Heavenly Sound Parlor. He was a quasi-emperor. Many cultivators who saw this scene held their breath. Yu Xian was going to suffer. Heavenly Sound Parlor, the Monarch clan, Jin Tian clan, Jade Zen Temple. The three forces gathered together and attacked in the night. Who could stop them? This kind of power was enough to make people despair. Liang Chuan's expression was gloomy. He looked at Lin Sun, who was standing in front of the courtyard, and said, Yu Jun, Wu Yunlian, and the others were all killed by you. Lin Sun nodded indifferently. Liang Chuan's eyes were cold, and he said, You also injured the Jin Tian clan? Lin Sun nodded again, his expression calm. There was nothing to hide. Liang Chuan took a deep breath, and his face was livid. If I'm not wrong, the death of the untainted Land Taoist court is also related to you, right? Lin Sun nodded again and said, Heavenly Sound Parlor can't protect its disciples, so I have to do it for you. His words were filled with sarcasm. When they heard this, the experts who were secretly watching all this were in an uproar. A few days ago, the death of the untainted Land Taoist court experts caused a huge commotion on the rocking ship. When everyone suspected that the young man in linen clothes and the old woman were the culprits, who would have thought that the real culprit was someone else? Yu Xian, this expert of the Monarch clan, Yu clan, who had always been ignored, had given them too much shock and surprise tonight. Liang Chuan was so angry that his eyes were about to spit fire. These days, the death of the untainted Land Taoist court experts had affected the Heavenly Sound Parlor, and everyone was anxious. Now, the Jin Tian clan experts were seriously injured, and it was foreseeable that the Heavenly Sound Parlor would be attacked again. All of this was done by the same person. What Liang Chuan could not tolerate the most was that Yu Xian had killed Yu Jun, Wu Yunlian, and the other experts of the Heavenly Sound Parlor. Die, you evil creature! Liang Chuan roared. But just as he was about to make a move, a cold, tall, and beautiful figure appeared out of thin air and said, Let the Jin Tian clan kill this person. Liang Chuan, who was in a rage, was startled by this sentence. Then he came to his senses and looked uncertain. In the end, he suppressed the boiling, killing intent in his heart and said, The Heavenly Sound Parlor did not do a good job and disturbed Miss Xianyue. Jin Tian Xuanyue's voice was cold. Don't blame the Heavenly Sound Parlor. Blame a group of trash for ruining the reputation of the Jin Tian clan. This shame should be washed away by me. Her voice floated in the night sky, like a sword piercing to the bone. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and glanced at the woman. Then he looked away and saw Wu Ming and the others in the distance. What about you? Do you want to fight too? Lin Sun asked. Wu Ming put his palms together and said calmly, If you come with us, you may be spared from death today. Jin Tian Xianyue said coldly, The Hidden Land Realm wants to fight with me? The Hidden Land Realm. All the cultivators who were paying attention to this scene were shocked, and their faces changed. Only then did they know that this group of monks who claimed to be from the Jade Zen Temple were actually from the hidden land realm, were the three dark giants. At the same time, the old man in a robe who was halfway up the mountain frowned. Monk Dukong, who was sitting cross-legged at the foot of the mountain, opened his eyes. But in the end, neither of the two emperors took any action. Wu Ming ignored Jintian Xianyue and just stared at Lin Sun. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and suddenly laughed. The old guy beside you didn't take action, but asked you to come together. In this case, I will play with you. As he said this, his aura suddenly changed. The cyan light was flowing, and the ancient cyan sky was pressing down on Zhou Su. His clothes were fluttering, and his black eyes were like lightning. He glanced at Jintian Xianyue and Wu Ming. Don't waste any more time. Come meet together. How arrogant he was. The overmatches who were watching this scene were all surprised. Was this guy really not afraid of death? Or did he not know the immensity of heaven and earth? Jintian Xianyue couldn't help frowning. For the first time in her life, she was looked down upon like this. Boom! Wu Ming was even more direct. He suddenly punched out like a Buddha reaching out his hand to suppress the world. In an instant, the sound of Sanskrit was like thunder, and the power of the palm covered the sky. The horrible black Buddha light crushed the void and kept roaring. The supreme inheritance of the hidden land realm, Buddhist land in the palm. It looked like a palm, but in fact, it was full of the realm of Tao. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he also pressed out his palm. Boom! This palm print was like a furnace, like an abyss, but not an abyss. It floated and sank, and 9 cauldrons surrounded it, suppressing the universe and engulfing everything. Chapter 1924. The power of the Tao domain that sacred monarch extinction controlled was naturally unimaginably terrifying. Wu Ming was one of the 9 Buddhist masters of the hidden land realm. He cultivated the inheritance of the Buddhist kingdom, so his foundation and combat power were not to be underestimated. The power of his palm was so great that even Liang Chuan, the quasi-emperor, was surprised, and the strong people who were watching the battle in secret were also shocked. But this palm was silently offset by Lin Sun. As Lin Sun's palm power burst out, boom! Wu Ming's whole body shook violently. His clothes fluttered, and the bamboo hat on his head suddenly exploded, debris flying. Up at the foot of the mountain, the old monk spat out a word. The entire guest welcoming mountain was suddenly covered with a layer of invisible defensive power. The old man in a robe quietly withdrew his right hand from his sleeve. He had planned to do the same before. Otherwise, just the eruption of this battle alone would definitely cause this guest welcoming mountain to explode. So strong. This guy hid his strength well. No wonder he could kill those strong people of the primitive Taoist court, and even suppress those strong people of the Jintian clan with one hand. There was a burst of surprised voices in different places of the reception mountain. Taoism peer, are you really not going to come with us? Wu Ming's eyes were like the sea, surging with obscure Sanskrit symbols. As he spoke, he stepped forward, and black lotuses emerged under his feet. Behind him, the light and shadow of the Buddha, chanting sutras and suppressing the dark hell, appeared, making him look terrifying. Boom! He suddenly raised his hand and used the law phenomenon. His 5 fingers condensed into a treasure bottle seal, which swept across the sky. Isn't it better for you to stay? Lin Sun said indifferently. With a flick of his finger, a big cauldron emerged, intertwined with Taoist markings and flowing laws, showing an unshakable momentum to suppress all directions. The treasure bottle seal and the big cauldron collided fiercely in the void. Terrible light and divine light spread, and the sound rumbled like thunder. The treasure bottle seal suddenly collapsed, and the big cauldron took the opportunity to suppress Wu Ming. Wu Ming's pupils shrank. He took a deep breath, and his body was covered with black Buddha light. Vaguely, he seemed to have turned into 3 heads and 6 arms, waving violently. Bang, bang, bang. Palm prints rained down on the cauldron. Every strike had the power to collapse mountains and rivers. In the end, the cauldron exploded. But Lin Sun had already taken advantage of the situation to attack. Like a king who dominated the country, He was unstoppable in the void with the power of the 9 cauldrons. Rumble. The sky was dark, and the void was in disorder. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had clashed over 100 times. The battle was dangerous and hair-raising. However, Wu Ming was completely suppressed. Lin Sun's attacks were just too ferocious and powerful. Every single move he made possessed the power to stabilize the world. Every single strike could easily kill a saint ruler. No matter how Wu Ming tried to resist or resolve the situation, he was unable to reverse the situation. It was not that he was not strong enough. On the contrary, as one of the 9 Zen lords of the Hidden Land realm, his foundation, cultivation, and the power of the great path that he had mastered were all top-notch among his peers. He was an overlord. If he had not been born in the Dark World, he would have easily ranked in the top 100 of the All-Heaven King Sage Board. It was just that this time he met Lin Sun, a peerless, ruthless man who had crossed the forbidden trial and cultivated the only Tao in all heavens. When it came to the attainments of peak Saint King realm, there were few who could compare with Lin Sun among the powerhouses of the same realm since ancient times. Even without using his original body, Lin Sun was fearless with the talent of Greenwood Taoism body. Wu Mingno. Witnessing this scene, many people's expressions changed, and they were shocked. At this time, how could they not see that the descendant of the Hidden Land realm was slightly inferior to Wu Ming in a head-on confrontation? The youth in linen wanted to rush out several times, but he was stopped by the old woman. He felt helpless and emotional. This guy had hidden his strength too well. Young lord, you will understand in the future that there is no shortage of such people in the Hongmeng world. The old woman's voice was calm. In fact, she also felt a trace of pity in her heart. It was true that there was no shortage of geniuses in the Hongmeng world, but geniuses like Lin Sun were rare. It was a pity that after today, such a genius would probably disappear from the world. Puff. In the field, Wu Ming couldn't help coughing up blood in the end. His face was pale, and his eyes were completely dignified. He was now 100% sure that Lin Sun must be the heretic. Even if Lin Sun's breath had been covered, the strength and means he showed were surprisingly similar to that of the heretic. He can't do it. Do you want to fight with me? Lin Sun's black hair fluttered, and his whole body was covered with cyan light as clear as glass. His figure was brilliant and proud. I can do it alone, Jintian Xianyue said coldly. Her figure flashed and suddenly came to the battlefield like a dream. She put her fingers together like a sword and cut the void with a swoosh. It was as sharp as lightning, as powerful as the wind, and as unrestrained as the wind. Fuyao Scripture of Sword. The youth in linen who had been watching the battle in the courtyard blurted out. This sword was the supreme inheritance of the Jintian family, a supreme sword scripture created by the White Emperor in ancient times. Lin Sun's figure flashed. Although he managed to avoid the sword, a strand of hair fell by his ear. If he had missed it by just a little bit, his neck would have been cut open. However, Lin Sun's face was calm. Wu Ming's eyes flickered, but he finally held back and didn't continue to fight. But he didn't withdraw from the battle either. He wouldn't allow Lin Sun to be killed by others. Chaotic Ocean. As soon as Jintian Xianyue made her move, she showed a fierce and swift posture. Her sword qi was dense, stirring up the wind and clouds. Every single sword strike was like a flowing light that flashed by, and it was chaotic like the wind. It carried the might to rise into the 9 heavens and reverse the might of the 5 elements. For a moment, the world was filled with sword shadows, sword light, and sword light. What a terrible sword power! Many practitioners who were watching the battle in the dark felt their eyes stinging and their hearts trembled. At this moment, Jintian Xianyue was like a female sword fairy, graceful and charming, and her sword intent was shocking. Is this the power of the 49th disciple of the holy King Gang? Even Wu Ming had to admit that this woman's attainments in swordsmanship were profound, and her cultivation was even stronger than his. But what made people feel strange was that no matter how fierce Jintian Xianyue's attack was, no matter how mighty the sword qi swept across the universe, Lin Sun could always suppress it with the power of the 9 cauldrons. It gave people a feeling that once the 9 cauldrons appeared, the world would be stable and unshakable. How is this possible? He's too strong. When did the Yu family, an imperial family, have such a fierce man? Countless people were in an uproar. In this battle, Jean Tian Xianyue showed her amazing demeanor as soon as she made her move. She deserved her reputation, but the power Lin Sun showed was even more surprising. No one had expected that an overmatch from the Yu family, an imperial family, would hide so deeply. No one knew that Lin Sun hadn't used the endless devouring scripture and the mysteries of the Great Way furnace scripture. Otherwise, his power would be even stronger. Clang! In the battlefield, Jean Tian Xianyue took out a Taoist sword, which glowed with snow-white brilliance like a Milky Way pouring down from the sky. The name of the sword was White Condensation, inherited from the primitive times. She looked calm, her clothes fluttering, and she held the sword to kill. Those who knew her well knew that at this moment, she had used all her strength. Clatter, the White Condensation Taoist sword swept out and suddenly turned into a sword domain. This sword domain was extremely magnificent. It turned into a giant city in the sea of clouds. The city tower was like a sword to the sky, surging with boundless white light. Vaguely, there seemed to be an illusory figure sitting on the city tower, blooming with supreme majesty. Halfway up the mountain, the eyes of the old man in the Taoist robe burst out a ball of divine light, revealing a look of joy. The sword plays White Emperor City, and the spirit reaches the ages. Her White Emperor City has finally been condensed. Yes, Jean Tian Xuanyue's sword domain was called White Emperor City. In order to condense this sword domain, she once sat alone in the clouds and quietly observed White Emperor City for 30 years. She absorbed the charm of White Emperor City and integrated it into her own swordsmanship. It should be known that White Emperor City was originally created by the White Emperor himself. Every inch of this city was branded with the traces of the Great Way left by the White Emperor. Jean Tian Xianyue seemed to be comprehending a city, but it could be said that she was comprehending the road of the Great Way left by the White Emperor. And today, she had condensed her own Dao domain. This was also the first time that she showed White Emperor City to the world. In an instant, a spectacle appeared in everyone's field of vision on the guest mountain. A magnificent and vast, snow-white ancient city stood in the clouds, bathed in the brilliance of stars, as if it was immortal. A majestic figure sat in it, overlooking the heavens. That scene caused countless people to be shocked, and they didn't dare believe that this was a phenomenon that a Dao domain could possess. Suppress. Under the shocked gaze of the crowd, Jean Tian Xianyue moved her mind, and the White Emperor's city in the clouds fell down. It was impossible to describe the horror of this blow. It was like a divine city descending from the sky, oppressing the world. The vast expanse of whiteness was so bright that people couldn't open their eyes and their souls were suppressed. Lin Sun's eyes were full of surprise. Before, he wanted to go to the Golden Sky world with Lu Qingyan to see the glory of White Emperor City, but he didn't expect that he would see White Emperor City in this way today. In an instant, his figure was covered and appeared in White Emperor City. Row upon row of buildings, the streets were clean and spacious and orderly. Outside the sky was the vast starry sky, and in the distance was the boundless sea of clouds. Above the city tower, a sword seal was hung, on which was written the ancient character White Emperor. Standing in the city and looking around, the mist and clouds were misty, and the buildings were ancient. It was like being in a legendary fairy city, majestic and magnificent, which didn't seem to belong to this world. Die here, and it won't damage your reputation. Jean Tian Xuanyue's cold voice sounded in the city, ethereal and traceless. Buzz! On the towering city tower, a sword seal of the White Emperor glowed. Suddenly, an imposing figure that seemed to be out of thin air appeared. He stood there with a terrifying aura. It was as if the first city lord of this city, Emperor Bai, was looking down on the world. Almost at the same time, the whole White Emperor's city suddenly shone, and countless bright sword chi swarmed out from the streets, buildings, sea of clouds, and starry sky. Fierce, wanton, bright, violent. The whole city was covered with sword rain. Chapter 1925. The sword chi was like wind, rain, waterfall, and torrent. The White Emperor city was filled with sword chi. Even Lin Sun had to admit that the Tao field of Jintian Xianyue was amazing, magnificent, and extraordinary. If it were an ordinary peer, he would not be able to resist it at all, and would end up being pierced by thousands of swords and die suddenly. However, Lin Sun seemed to turn a blind eye to all this. He walked along the clean and spacious street toward the top of the city wall. His manner was leisurely. From all directions, the dense sword chi cut through the void with ear-piercing screeches. It was as dense as a tide and as turbulent as the sea, covering the sky and the earth. However, before it could touch Lin Sun, it melted inch by inch at a distance of 30 meters. At this moment, the myriad of sword chi melted and vanished silently like snow, causing Lin Sun to seem to be invulnerable to all kinds of attacks. He walked forward like this, and the sword rain was like a curtain, piling up layer by layer, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. But no matter how they attacked, they could not shake Lin Sun within 30 meters. Almost in the blink of an eye, Lin Sun was close to the towering city tower. He raised his head and looked over. A mighty figure sat atop the city tower, and his entire body was covered in vast sword insight. He was like a god of the sword Tao of legend. Was this primordial White Emperor? A legendary figure who established the supreme emperor realm with the sword? Immediately, Lin Sun withdrew his gaze, feeling a little regretful. This phantom was merely an aura that could intimidate a cultivator's state of mind, but it did not possess the true might of an emperor. In short, it was just a phantom with nothing more than the momentum of a great emperor. But even so, to be able to integrate the momentum of a great emperor into one's own Tao field, this was a wonderful means. Jintian Xianyue was moved for the first time. Her beautiful eyes shrank, and her mind was rippling. She found it impossible to imagine that there was someone in this world who could stroll leisurely in her White Emperor's city. Did this mean that the other party's control of the power of the Tao field was far above her? How is this possible? Jintian Xianyue had always been extremely conceited and had absolute confidence in her own strength. She had never encountered such a setback since she was a child. For a moment, her mind was in turmoil. Seeing that Lin Sun was about to approach the towering city tower, Jintian Xianyue took a deep breath and used his most powerful trump card. My Tao is like a city, indestructible. My city is like a world. My sword divides life and death. Clang! The White Emperor's sword seal that was hanging on the towering city gate tower suddenly transformed into a sword. It was 2 feet and 3 inches long, for fingers wide and pure white. Rumble! Countless torrents of swords converged over from all directions, and they fused into the sword, causing the sword to seem like a sun that glowed even more dazzling, while its might grew even more oppressive. The entire White Emperor city was shrouded by the terrifying sword intent it emitted. Lin Sun stopped and finally showed a trace of solemnity. This sword also made him feel a kind of pressure that hit him in the face. Kill! On the city gate tower, the sword seemed to have sucked out all the strength of White Emperor City. With a slow but omnipresent might, it slowly chopped down. This sword stretched across the universe and covered all of White Emperor City. There was no way to dodge. This sword is worthy of a full blow from me. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and the embryonic form of a Tao domain emerged in the space of 30 meters. It was like a furnace, like an abyss, but not an abyss. It was obscure, profound, and indescribable. Boom! At this moment, Lin Sun's figure seemed to turn into a black hole. The nearby buildings, streets, the ground under his feet, and the starry sky above his head all cracked and burst as if they were pulled by a terrifying force. When the sword slashed down, the entire White Emperor City was turned into a deep abyss. How terrifying and dazzling was this sword! But at this time, it fell silently into the abyss and was swallowed up and disappeared. White Emperor City burst into pieces at this moment. On the welcoming mountain, the divine light burst out, and the thunderous roar was turbulent and chaotic. Jin Tian Xinyue, who was graceful and beautiful, looked pale. A wisp of bright red blood dripped from her lips, and her body trembled slightly. Her beautiful eyes were full of disbelief, and she stood there in a daze. The White Emperor's city, that she had condensed after 30 years of meditation, was broken like this. The whole place was silent. All the people on and off the welcoming mountain were shocked. Jin Tian Xinyue, an extraordinary fairy-like existence, and her White Emperor city was so wonderful, but she failed to trap and kill Yu Xian. This was too unexpected. The old woman was a little absent-minded, which was rare for her. She thought to herself, "This man can't be a nobody, but I don't know which orthodoxy he comes from." The young man in linen opened his mouth wide, and then he gasped. He was also shocked and amazed. At the foot of the mountain, Monk Dukong's eyes were surging with divine light. This heretic was completely different from when he was in Kunlun ruins. On the mountainside, the old man in linen robe was silent and frowning. Jin Tian Xinyue, the pride of the younger generation of Jin Tian clan, was favored by him. He thought that she could easily suppress her opponent after she broke through and condensed White Emperor City. Who would have thought that it would be such a result? In front of the courtyard, Lin Sun stood in the void, spotless and aloof. His whole body was flowing with misty, cyan Taoist light. Different from before, when they looked at him again, everyone's eyes and thoughts were completely different. Did such a peerless figure really come from the Yu clan, an imperial family? Why don't you fight me together? Lin Sun's voice broke the silence in the field. He looked at Jin Tian Xinyue and Wu Ming without sadness or joy. Wu Ming was full of fighting intent. Jin Tian Xinyue took a deep breath and said with a cold expression, "A loss is a loss. I won't go so far as to join hands with others just to win." She had her pride. Lin Sun smiled and didn't insist. In fact, there was no need to fight this battle at all. Those old monsters were doomed to not watch him kill Wu Ming or Jin Tian Xinyue. As if to prove Lin Sun's inference true, in the next moment, a warm voice resounded. "Xianyu, you did very well. A true powerhouse isn't invincible, but whether or not they can stand up again after defeat." With the voice, the figure of the old man in linen robe appeared out of thin air. "Greetings, old ancestor." Jin Tian Xuanyue's eyes were complicated. She knew that when the old ancestor appeared, all this would come to an end. And the man who destroyed her White Emperor city, he was destined to pay the price. As Jin Tianchi said, the Jin Tian clan couldn't be disgraced. The whole field was silent. Countless strong people who were paying attention to all this felt suffocated at this moment. All their senses were cut off, and they couldn't see what was happening in the field anymore. But they knew that Sword Emperor Fufeng was about to take action. "I'm afraid I won't see Yu Xin again after tonight." Many people sighed in their hearts and felt pity for Lin Sun. It was undoubtedly a pity that a peerless figure who could defeat Jin Tian Xianyue would die here before he could climb the road to the Emperor realm. The young man in linen robe felt nervous and couldn't help looking at the old woman beside him. The old woman also sighed in her heart, but she still shook her head. They were just passers-by in this storm and couldn't get involved. Perhaps, after this incident, I'll be able to let the young lord know that no matter how dazzling a monstrous genius is, no matter how heaven-defying an extraordinary genius is, they're bound to die prematurely, the old woman murmured in her heart. The young man in linen robe clenched his fists and said word by word calmly, "Granny, this matter makes me very unhappy." He didn't ask for the old woman's help. He was really unhappy in his heart, as if a stone was stuck in his chest. "I knew it would be like this after I beat the young one," the old one came. In the silent and depressing atmosphere, Lin Sun showed a touch of sarcasm, but he didn't panic. Standing in the distance, Liang Chuan, a quasi-emperor, became stiff and frightened after the appearance of the old man in linen robe. But he never thought that Lin Sun, a peerless saint king, dared to say such words in front of a great emperor at this time. For a moment, he couldn't help thinking bitterly that maybe he was really old. The ancient way of the starry sky has always been cruel. No matter how talented you are just an ant in front of absolute power. The old man in linen robe said indifferently, I won't kill you, but you can't escape from your punishment. I will suppress you for 10,000 years as a punishment. Suppress for 10,000 years. This was even crueler than killing Lin's son. In the pursuit of the great Tao, one wrong step would lead to every wrong step. What he missed might be time, but in fact, it was an opportunity to climb on the path of Tao. Just like in the past, if Lin's son was suppressed, how could he have the chance to go to the absolute domain and the 9 regions battlefield? How could he go to the Kunlun ruins? If he didn't enter the absolute domain, he wouldn't be able to prove his Tao. If he didn't enter the 9 regions battlefield, he wouldn't be able to prove his Tao. If he didn't enter the Kunlun ruins, how could he obtain the inheritance left behind by the master of Mountain Heart? One could imagine how many similar opportunities Lin's son would miss if he was suppressed for 10,000 years. The old man's punishment was too merciless. Lin's son couldn't help but feel angry. He looked at the old man in linen robe. It seems that I'm not important enough. I was merciful and let a group of beasts go, but in exchange, I got such revenge. At this point, he laughed self-deprecatingly. His voice was low, and his eyes were terrifyingly deep. It's my fault. If I knew this would happen, I would have killed them all. The old man in linen robe frowned. However, before he could speak, a skinny old monk appeared out of thin air. It was Du Kong from the Hidden Land Realm. Fellow Taoist, why don't you hand this kid over to the Hidden Land Realm? We'll definitely repay you in the future. Du Kong's voice was hoarse. Another martial emperor. Moreover, he was here for Yuxian. Liang Chuan's entire body was trembling. His legs were weak, and his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. The atmosphere in the surroundings was extremely oppressive at this moment. Jin Tian, Xian Yue, Wu Ming, and the rest stood silently. No matter what the outcome was, in their hearts, Lin Sun would not be able to escape this calamity. In the courtyard, the young man in linen robe pursed his lips as he stared fixedly at the scene. What he saw today had caused an incomparable impact on his mental state, and his chest was so stuffy that it was about to explode. He even thought that if he didn't have Granny by his side, then if he encountered such a situation, would only death await him? Chapter 1926. On the Guest Mountain, the atmosphere was depressing. All the divine senses from the outside world were cut off. The elder in the linen robe wasn't surprised by monk Du Kong's intervention. He just didn't understand. Is an ant-like thing worthy of you, an Emperor Buddhist Lord, making a move? The elder in the linen robe's voice was indifferent. This was not normal. The Hidden Land Realm was one of the 3 dark giants and was rejected by the entire Starry Sky Ancient Path. An Emperor Buddha like Du Kong wouldn't dare to show up on the Starry Sky Ancient Path unless it was an important matter. Otherwise, he would be targeted by some powerful figures. Monk Du Kong looked calm. This man is an unforgivable heresy. He has killed many descendants of the Hidden Land Realm over the years. After a pause, he continued, As you can see, this man's combat power is almost invincible among the top Saint Kings. Even if we send an ordinary emperor to be, I'm afraid it will be difficult to kill him. His words made Wu Ming and Jin Tian Xuanyue's hearts tremble. They had fought with Lin Sun before, so they naturally knew how terrifying his power was. They even suspected that Lin Sun hadn't used all his combat power from the beginning to the end. Heresy, the elder in the linen robe snorted. I'm afraid the real reason is more than that, right? Monk Du Kong frowned. Before he could speak, the elder in the linen robe said indifferently, You can take this man away if you want, but I promise I won't stop you after 10,000 years. What he meant was that this time, Yuxian must be suppressed for 10,000 years. Even if the Hidden Land Realm intervened, it wouldn't work. Monk Du Kong sighed softly and said, My friend, why do you have to do this? His figure flashed, and he split into 2. In the field, another monk Du Kong appeared. The two looked exactly the same, except that one was wearing a linen robe, and his aura was obscure and dim. The other was wearing a white robe, solemn and dignified. His whole body was flowing with the aura of great light and great perfection. Two Zen bodies of light and darkness. The elder in the linen robe narrowed his eyes. This was the most mysterious and horrifying supreme inheritance in the hidden land realm. Two Zen bodies. One cultivated the dark way of earth treasury, and the other cultivated the light way of earth treasury. Light and darkness intertwined. Good and evil were separated, but the Buddha's light shone and walked through the darkness. It was extremely marvelous. The most frightening thing was that the Zen bodies of light and darkness both possessed the same cultivation level and the same battle prowess. Fighting them was like fighting one against two. My friend, if it is a duel, the hidden land realm is not afraid of death. Please reconsider. The two Dukong monks spoke at the same time. One of them had a compassionate expression, while the other had a cold expression. It was an extremely shocking visual impact. He didn't hesitate to threaten me for the sake of an ant. It looks like there's surely something extraordinary about this kid, right? The old man's eyes seemed to have a myriad of swords surging within them, and they were suffused with a terrifying sharpness. Jin Tian Xianyue and Wu Ming's hearts tightened. Who would have thought that the two emperors wouldn't give in to each other just because of Yu Xian? As for Lin Sun, he was ignored from beginning to end. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, and everyone wanted to slaughter him. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel an inexplicable anger in his heart. For a long time, he hadn't experienced this feeling again. Two emperors were superior. One wanted to suppress him for 10,000 years, and the other regarded him as a heretic and wanted to take him away. And they even fought for him. What do they think of themselves as prey at any time? Lin Sun's black eyes became deeper and deeper. He suddenly said, "If I become an emperor one day, I will let you experience this feeling." His voice was calm. His expression was also calm without any ripples. But the feeling within it was so resolute, firm, and unquestionable. Wu Ming and Jin Tian Xianyue were both stunned, and immediately a sense of absurdity surged in their hearts. Did this guy really think he could survive this time? The old man in the cloth robe twitched his lips and said, "You know that you are at the end of the road, but you are unwilling to complain? Childish." In this world, everyone would roar, swear, and curse unwillingly when they were dying. This was undoubtedly ridiculous. No one would take it seriously. The old monk Du Kong shook his head and ignored him. "Buddy, I, Xian Join, have never been convinced by anyone in my life. If you die this time, I will help you realize your wish in the future." In the courtyard, the young man in linen, who had been so depressed that he was about to explode, suddenly shouted. His eyes turned red and his body trembled. The old woman was stunned. In her memory, it was the first time that she saw the young man in linen so angry and determined. In the past, he was careless, heartless, and lawless. Although his cultivation advanced rapidly, he had always been like a child who couldn't grow up. But now, it seemed that he was really different. The old man in the cloth robe frowned. His surname was Xian. Was he the descendant of that ancient clan? The old monk Du Kong looked indifferent. If it weren't for the old woman, he would not hesitate to kill such a young man who talked arrogantly. Xian Join. Lin Sun said in his heart, "It turned out that this boy's surname was Xian. Since you call me buddy, I will tell you that I will not die. If you curse me again, I will beat you." Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun said calmly. His words made Xian Join's eyes wide open. How could this guy still be so stubborn before death? Wu Ming and Jin Tian Xianyue also shook their heads. Would not die. How could it be? The old man in linen robe suddenly laughed. If we confront each other, this nonentity will live for some time. Why don't we suppress him first and then confront each other? The old monk Du Kong said, "Okay." As he spoke, he suddenly stretched out his hand. Boom! The world was turned upside down. The supreme power of the Emperor Tao spread and turned into a dark prison, covering Lin Sun suddenly. Almost at the same time, The old man in linen robe flicked his finger, and a wisp of sword chi broke through the air, ignoring the barrier of space. The sword chi was like a mountain pressing down. The two Emperor Realm experts attacked casually, but the power and momentum contained in them were unimaginably horrible. If they just wanted to kill Lin Sun, it would not be so troublesome. They only needed to emit the pressure of the Emperor Realm to kill Lin Sun on the spot. However, neither the old man in linen robe nor the old monk Du Kong would kill Lin Sun at this moment. The former wanted to suppress Lin Sun. The latter was worried that if Lin Sun was killed, the good fortune of becoming an emperor or ancestor would be exposed and arouse the covetous eyes of the old man in linen robe. No matter who it was, they all knew that Lin Sun could not escape. The old woman hesitated for a long time, and finally sighed and gave up the plan. She was alone. Even if she saved Lin Sun at this moment, it would be difficult for her to resist the killing of two Emperor Realm experts. However, Lin Sun was rarely calm at this moment. In a heaven-accessing place, the graceful figure of she had quietly walked out of the gate to heaven. She seemed to notice something and suddenly stopped. Almost at the same time, the welcoming mountain trembled violently. Dong! As if suffering from a terrible impact, a dull sound rang out. Then, the dark cage that enveloped Lin Sun shattered and dissipated like a piece of paper. The pupils of the two Du Kong monks froze at the same time. Crack! The sword that suppressed Lin Sun collapsed in the void, and the light rain scattered and turned into nothingness. The old man in linen robes' clothes were fluttering, and his pupils were bursting with divine light. This, in the courtyard in the distance, the old woman's face changed slightly. There was another Emperor Realm expert. One should know that the welcoming mountain had long been covered by the aura of the old monk Du Kong and the old man in linen robe. Ordinary people could not even sense the existence of the welcoming mountain, let alone get close. But at this moment, the power that covered the welcoming mountain was blasted away by someone in a simple and violent way. Moreover, the power was so terrifying that it destroyed the attacks of the old monk Du Kong and the old man in linen robe. The whole place was silent. Wu Ming, Jin Tian, Xian Yue, and others couldn't help but be stunned. No one had expected such a reversal at this moment. Even Lin Sun was stunned. She did not appear, but the killing disaster was resolved by someone. After that, a figure suddenly appeared in everyone's field of vision. He wore a pair of straw sandals and carried a rusty and mottled hoe on his shoulder. His skin was dark, and he seemed like a farmer. No one could see where he came from, and no one noticed how he got there. It was as if he had been standing there for a long time, standing in front of Lin Sun. Lin Sun only felt suffocated. It was just a back view, but it gave him the feeling that it was a spine that could support the world, majestic and boundless. At the same time, the old monk Du Kong and the old man in linen robe revealed solemn expressions. The middle-aged man who looked like a farmer looked inconspicuous, but they couldn't see through him. Even before this, with their cultivation, they actually didn't notice any signs when the middle-aged man appeared. Fellow cultivator, did you come uninvited for this lad as well? The old monk, Du Kong, spoke. His sleeves fluttered and his voice was like a bell. His expression was solemn, which was rare. Is there a need to guess? The old man in linen robe said indifferently. This lad was so calm earlier. I'm afraid he already knew that someone would come to help. His words made the atmosphere even more oppressive. Wu Ming and Jin Tian Xianyue were both shocked. Originally, they thought that Yu Xian was just a descendant of the imperial Yu family, and that he would definitely die if he came alone. Who would have thought that he actually had helper? Moreover, it was a terrifying existence that hid his strength deeply. This guy hides his strength too deeply. In the courtyard, the young man in linen robe smiled bitterly. He felt that he was like a fool and worried about nothing. However, there was a kind of indescribable relief in his heart. At least, this guy wouldn't die for the time being. The old woman looked at the joy between the brows of the young man in linen robe and felt a little complicated. No wonder the young man never feared her. It turned out that he was really confident. The dark-skinned man stood there like a farmer standing in the field. He didn't have any power at all and seemed very dull. No matter who spoke, he didn't pay attention to them. He only turned his head and looked at Lin Sun with a simple and honest smile, as if saying, "Don't worry, I'm here." Lin Sun had vaguely guessed something, and his eyes became bright. However, before he could speak, the dark-skinned man had already turned his head and looked at the old monk Du Kong and the old man in linen robe. The smile on his face had disappeared, for words came out from his lips gently. "How do you want to die?" Chapter 1927. How do you want to die? One sentence, 4 words. But at this moment, it was like a clap of thunder that shook everyone's heart. They were stunned and almost couldn't believe it. This was the first sentence the middle-aged man with dark skin and the appearance of a farmer said after he arrived. His voice was dull and without any momentum. But even so, it was too sudden and absurd. The old man in the linen robe was a famous great emperor in the starry sky. His name was Sword Emperor Fufeng, and he had been famous for 30,000 years. Monk Dukong was an emperor Buddha in the Hidden Land realm. He cultivated the light and dark bodies. He could split himself into 2, which was equivalent to 2 emperor realm existences. Under normal circumstances, who would dare to disrespect them? But now, the dark-skinned, middle-aged man's words were shocking. Asking 2 emperor realm existences, how do they want to die? This was crazy. Even a young man in the linen robe gasped. Even if his father was here, he wouldn't be able to say such domineering words, right? The old woman's eyes flashed. She was also stunned. "Ha-ha!" The old man in the linen robe laughed. His clothes fluttered and his hair flew. His momentum shot up to the heavens. The elegance of Sword Emperor Fufeng was on full display at this moment. How many years has it been? Have I been living in seclusion for too long? How can I be underestimated to this extent? The old man in the linen robe's eyes were deep. His figure was like a god. His unparalleled sword was like a landslide and a tsunami covering the starry sky. Underestimate. The middle-aged farmer thought about it and shook his head. "You're wrong. I never underestimate anyone. But you, I really can't overestimate you." The old man in the linen robe's smile disappeared. "Is that so?" The middle-aged farmer answered seriously, "Yes." The veins on the old man's forehead bulged. His chest felt heavy. The middle-aged farmer's serious attitude didn't seem like he was mocking him, but it made people uncomfortable. You said his attitude wasn't good, but he didn't show it. His words were dull and calm, and his expression was serious. This feeling could make people vomit blood. No need to talk nonsense. Let's fight. Suddenly, Monk Dukong made his move. 2 figures appeared. One was bathed in the dark Buddha's light, and the other released endless light. Boom! Between heaven and earth, the sound of Buddha was like thunder. How terrifying was the attack of an emperor? At this moment, Wu Ming and Jintian Xianyue felt their bodies lighten. They were teleported out of the arena and had no strength to struggle. In the field, there were 2 incomparably tall Buddhas, one black and one white. They filled the space, chanting Buddhist chants as if they were going to collapse the sky. With the chanting of Buddhist chants, the enormous rocking ship that was as large as a floating continent suddenly stopped in the starry sky, and the nearby stars and the surrounding void all began to shake violently. Rumbling Buddhist chants shook the area. Old Monk Space Crossing raised his fist and punched out. Tao light poured down like a heavenly river. As for the old monk Radiance Crossing Sky, he held a Buddhist staff and struck out horizontally. For a time, heaven and earth turned upside down and space collapsed. The might of the Emperor Realm appeared in the world at this moment. "I only want you to choose a way to die. I have no intention of destroying this place." The dark-skinned man who looked like a farmer frowned and said in a deep voice. He didn't seem to move, but verdant ancient trees took root in the void. Their branches and leaves were luxuriant, and they spread in all directions, emitting billions of rays of light. In the blink of an eye, the rocking ship was covered by the ancient trees. The nearby starry sky was also covered by verdant branches and leaves. Looking from afar, It was as if an ancient forest had suddenly appeared in the universe. Every leaf was bigger than a star. At the same time, the middle-aged farmer suddenly stepped forward and instantly punched out 3 times. Boom! Amidst the world-shaking collision, the body of the old monk's space-crossing sky trembled, and the dark Buddhist light that filled the sky suddenly dispersed. He coughed out blood, and his brows were tightly locked together, revealing a shocked expression. The middle-aged farmer's first punch was like a plow that swept through the acupoints, and it injured him. Clang! The second punch caused the staff of the old monk's space-crossing sky to suddenly let out a wail, and cracks appeared on it. And his Buddhist body was directly forced back by the terrifying fist energy. With every step he took back, the Buddhist light on his body would disperse a little. When he took the 9th step, the light on his body had already become extremely dim, and his face was suffused with a dark green luster. The second punch's momentum was like a landslide and a tsunami, killing the world and destroying everything. Boom! When the third punch was thrown out, the expressions of the old monk's space-crossing skies, 2 Buddhist bodies changed, and they didn't hesitate to gather together and attack together, executing a supreme divine ability. Great Light Dragon Elephant Seal. Great Dark Hell Prison Suppression Technique. In the void, it was as if there was an ancient divine elephant trampling through the starry sky. The stars exploded, and boundless light whistled through the void. At the same time, a black lotus bloomed above the blood purgatory, and the stamen of the flower shot out billions of rays of Buddhist light. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the middle-aged farmer didn't have the power to defend himself, just this Emperor Realm power would be able to explode this part of the void, causing the void to sink and all things to be destroyed. But even so, the old monk's space-crossing sky was unable to block the third punch. Boom! The ancient divine elephant was reduced to ashes. The black lotus that suppressed the blood purgatory instantly withered. As for the old monk's space-crossing sky's 2 Buddhist bodies, they were fiercely suppressed by the fist energy and smashed onto the ground, causing the guest welcoming mountain to shake. Clatter, his 2 Buddhist bodies suddenly merged into one. It was obvious that he couldn't hold on any longer. His old face was pale and gloomy, and he was suppressed to the ground, unable to break free. 3 punches. The winner was decided. When the smoke and dust dispersed, everyone was shocked. The rocking boat was covered by ancient trees that covered the sky, so it wasn't damaged, and even the guest welcoming mountain was undamaged. But the old monk's space-crossing sky, an Emperor Realm Buddhist lord, was suppressed by 3 punches and couldn't get up. Everything, from the beginning to the end, only happened in a flash. And from the beginning to the end, the middle-aged farmer only punched 3 times. How terrifying was the Emperor Realm? In the eyes of cultivators, it was a supreme existence, as if omnipotent, able to shake the heavens and deter all directions. And the old monk's space-crossing sky was not an ordinary Emperor Realm existence. He, who controlled the light and dark Zen bodies, was like 2 Emperor Realm experts fighting together in a real battle. But even so, he was still defeated. It was a complete mess. Such a scene made Lin Sun's eyes wide open, and he was shocked. Strictly speaking, with his cultivation, he couldn't see any clues at all, and he couldn't feel the supreme mystery contained in the power of the Emperor Realm. Even if it wasn't for the protection of the middle-aged farmer, he would have been killed on the spot by the horrible power of the Emperor Realm at the beginning of the battle. But Lin Sun was very clear that the old monk's space-crossing sky could not be suppressed so easily by ordinary Emperor Realm figures. Wu Ming and others were trembling all over, and their minds had been shocked, and they were completely stunned. In their hearts, the Buddha space-crossing sky was like an invincible supreme existence, but now he was suppressed by 3 punches. Jin Tian Xinhua looked pale, and she was in a trance. The previous scene also made her suffer a great shock. The young man in linen rubbed his eyes and murmured, "Grandma, is my father as fierce as him?" The old woman fell into a rare silence. Because she couldn't calm down, and her heart was full of turbulence. As an Emperor Realm cultivator, he knew how horrible the power of the Emperor Realm was. It was almost impossible for two Emperor Realm cultivators to kill each other unless there was a great disparity in strength. But now, Space Crossing Sky was suppressed by 3 punches. Did this mean that the farmer's strength wasn't just a level higher, but it had completely surpassed Dukong? As a Buddhist practitioner, you have no mercy when you fight, and you don't care about the safety of the creatures here. No wonder the descendants of the Hidden Land Realm can only live in the Dark World. The farmer's voice was dull and plain, and he still looked like a farmer. But when they looked at him again, their eyes had become different. Who are you? Why have I never heard of such a great emperor on the starry sky, ancient path? On the ground, the old monk Space Crossing Sky's voice was hoarse. Me? The farmer thought about it seriously and said, I'm a farmer. Puff! The old monk Space Crossing Sky was so angry that he directly vomited blood. A farmer? How could a farmer have such fighting power? The others were also stunned. How could someone who could suppress an Emperor Realm expert with 3 punches be a farmer? But Lin Sun believed it, because he knew that Gu Yupu, the 9th senior fellow apprentice, was just a stupid woodcutter in the mountain before he started to cultivate. However, senior brother Yupu was able to create the Great Tao Yellow Court Scripture after he started cultivating. He was able to suppress the founder of the Emperor Kong clan, Demon Emperor Dutian, in the Tao battles of the emperors. Which senior fellow apprentice is he? Lin Sun thought quickly. I never lie. As if sensing that people didn't believe him, the farmer explained seriously, it's just that I used to plant crops in the field, but now I plant some things of Tao. Everyone was stunned and felt it was ridiculous and weird. A farmer could step into the Supreme Emperor Realm? Who would believe it? The old monk Space Crossing Sky, who was suppressed on the ground, felt suffocated and spat out another mouthful of blood. He felt that the farmer was clearly humiliating him. Even Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. This senior fellow apprentice was really an honest man, but when an honest man told the truth, it was easy to make people sad. In the field, only the old man in the cloth robe kept silent. His expression was uncertain, and he didn't say a word. He didn't do anything. After witnessing the miserable situation of the old monk Space Crossing Sky, he didn't dare to do anything rashly. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. How do you want to die? At this time, the farmer seemed to ignore the old man in the cloth robe and looked at the old monk Space Crossing Sky, who was suppressed on the ground. If you kill me, the Hidden Land Realm will be shocked because of this. If you let me go, the Hidden Land Realm will never be your enemy in the future. The old monk Space Crossing Sky took a deep breath and said in a hoarse voice, an Emperor Realm cultivator was begging for mercy. No one present had ever seen such a scene before. For a moment, their hearts were in turmoil. Did the Emperor Realm cultivators also fear death? Impossible. The farmer shook his head with a calm and unquestionable look. The old monk Space Crossing Sky's heart sank. All the others present were nervous, and their hearts were in their throats. If so, you're doomed to be doomed in the future. Space Crossing Sky's voice was hoarse. Even ants wanted to live, not to mention a man who had gone through untold hardships to become an emperor. Before his voice died away, his body suddenly turned into countless black shadows, breaking through the void and rushing to the void in all directions. Thanks to Jia, Yuling Long, Little Lingzi, and other children for their gifts and support. Some readers said that the 9th senior brother Gu Yupu was a woodcutter, and this senior brother was a farmer. The goldfish suddenly thought that the protagonist should be a miner. Will there be a senior brother who is a fisherman? No, because I don't agree. Chapter 1928. Billions of figures were densely packed as they charged in all directions. No one could tell which one was old Monk Dukong. In fact, many people didn't expect that Monk Dukong, who was suppressed on the ground, still had the strength to struggle. But the farmer thought of it. Is this the body transfiguration method passed down by Ksitigarbha Buddha? But it seems that you've only mastered a little bit of it. In a muffled voice, the farmer raised his head slightly. Whoosh, countless towering trees that covered the void of this universe swayed their branches. Every leaf that was as big as stars was flowing with brilliant light of the way. For a moment, the world was completely drowned by the light of the way. Under the cover of the light of the way, the hundreds of millions of figures transformed by Monk Dukong were incinerated and disappeared like locusts in a fire. Are you really going to kill us all? Monk Dukong's angry voice resounded with uneasiness. Yes, the farmer answered honestly. Boom! The surroundings were filled with surging light of the way. The ancient trees were like the legendary trees of the Great Path, emitting boundless divine light and energy. In just a few breaths, the hundreds of millions of figures transformed by Monk Dukong were all incinerated and wiped out on the spot. Dead? Many people swallowed their saliva with difficulty and looked shocked. That was a cultivator in the Emperor realm. However, it seemed that the farmer had killed them effortlessly. He's not dead yet, the farmer said. Under everyone's puzzled gaze, he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed. In the distance, Wu Ming and more than a dozen descendants of Xidagarba didn't have time to react. Their bodies all turned into ashes, and they were killed on the spot. You're so cruel. In the void, Monk Dukong's angry and unwilling voice came to an abrupt stop. The farmer said, I'm not as cruel as this old monk. In fact, these descendants of Xidagarba have already been killed by him using his secret method. I just killed the incarnation of this old monk. Everyone was startled. Before, they all thought that Monk Dukong had transformed into thousands of figures and escaped. Who would have thought that he could kill Wu Ming and the others and take over their bodies without making a sound? This was too terrifying. Grandma, are the people of the Hidden Land realm all so ruthless and cruel? The hemp-clothed youth was shocked. As one of the three giants of darkness, they're naturally different from ordinary martial cultivators. The old woman said in a low voice. She was even more shocked by the farmer's methods. He suppressed Monk Dukong with 3 punches and then destroyed the billions of incarnations of Monk Dukong with ease. A martial emperor was killed without any struggle. This made her heart tremble and her entire body go cold. Just where did this farmer come from? Why had he never heard of such an incredible existence on the starry sky, ancient path? The surroundings were silent, and the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. The farmer stood in front of Lin's son and looked at the old man. Without waiting for him to speak, the cloth-robed old man took a deep breath, lowered his head, and cupped his hands. I'm Jin Tianhong, the 16th-generation descendant of the monarch race, Jin Tian clan. Fellow Taoist cultivation is profound and unfathomable. I'm far from your level. I hope fellow Taoists can show mercy. His voice was filled with bitterness. So what if you're an emperor? In the face of absolute power, they could only lower their heads. At this moment, Jin Tian Xuanyue's pretty face turned pale. She was the most dazzling talent of the young generation of the monarch race, Jin Tian clan. But just now, she was directly suppressed by Lin's son in a head-on confrontation. And the ancestor, a famous sword emperor in the starry sky, who was worshipped by her as a god, was also forced by the situation to lower his head and bend his back. A series of blows made her feel like she was about to collapse. What pride, what conceit, what identity she was proud of, all of it was broken at this moment. Even the old woman couldn't help but be moved when she saw the cloth-robed old man lower his head. The martial emperor realm shocked the heavens and was looked up to by countless people. But who could know that the martial emperor realm would also be afraid, lower their heads, and fall? Just like at this moment, Monk Dukong was killed, and Sword Emperor Fufeng lowered his head. I don't lie, but I also like to be serious. The farmer's voice was dull. If I think it's wrong, I won't let you go even if you kneel down and kowtow. The cloth-robed old man's heart sank. The farmer said, You just said that the Jin Tian clan can't afford to lose face, so you want to suppress my junior brother for 10,000 years. Then let me ask you, my junior brother is being humiliated like this. If I, as a senior brother, don't help him, where will I put my face? Junior brother, just a title, but it was earth-shattering. The cloth-robed old man's body shook in disbelief. How could an ant-like character be such a terrifying junior brother of an Emperor Realm cultivator? The old woman and the young man in linen clothes exchanged a look and saw the shock in each other's eyes. They thought that the farmer would be Lin Sun Sr., who would have thought that the two were actually brothers. Liang Chuan, the supreme elder of the heavenly sound parlor, who had been standing far away, was dumbfounded. Everything that had happened today was like a nightmare to him. How did you clan member become the junior brother of an Emperor Realm cultivator? If they had known this, the heavenly sound parlor would have worshipped him like an ancestor long ago. How would they dare to slight him? It was also at this time that Liang Chuan finally understood why the farmer dared to kill the primitive Taoist core cultivators so recklessly. His senior brother dared to kill an Emperor Realm cultivator without blinking an eye. With such a senior brother, what wouldn't he dare to do? No wonder, no wonder. Liang Chuan's lips trembled, and he was in a trance. Only Lin Sun smiled. Sure enough, it was his senior brother. No wonder she didn't show up. I am willing to pay the price. The cloth-robed old man's voice became more and more bitter as he lowered his head. The farmer said, "Let me ask you again, if my junior brother is an ant, what am I as a senior brother?" Previously, the cloth-robed old man called Lin Sun an ant, full of disdain and contempt. He saw Lin Sun as a prey that could be slaughtered at any time. But now, facing the farmer's question, his face was pale and he was speechless. How else could he explain? The farmer said again, "My junior brother has been merciful and didn't kill anyone in the fight between young people. But for the so-called dignity of the clan, he let you, an Emperor Realm cultivator, fight in person. Isn't it too much to bully others?" The cloth-robed old man's body stiffened and his lips wriggled. But in the end, he sighed softly and had nothing to say. If you have a high realm, you can regard others as ants and take whatever you want. If you are of noble birth, you can look down on others and trample on them at will. The farmer thought for a while and then said, "This is indeed something that has happened every day since ancient times. People are almost used to it." He looked serious and rarely solemn. But in my case, this is not right. There is no noble or lowly life, no strong or weak. Only in this way can we know the meaning of all living beings and have a heart of reverence. Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. There is no noble or lowly life, no strong or weak. This should be the great Tao aspiration that senior brother made, right? He's just a farmer, yet he's able to say such things. Is this the reason why he's so accomplished in the Emperor Realm? The old woman was lost in thought. The Emperor Realm was the cultivation of the state of mind, which was mysterious. The level of a person's achievements was closely related to the beliefs he held. The farmer gave off a simple and inconspicuous feeling, but the state of mind and strength he possessed could be said to be extremely shocking. The cloth-robed old man closed his mouth and said nothing. He had already admitted defeat and was only waiting for the result. The farmer sighed softly and said, "You don't like to reason, and you don't want to listen to reason. But reason is the truth of the great way. If you don't reason, what is the point of seeking the great way?" Lin Sun was shocked. Reason, the truth of the great way? This kind of elaboration on the great way made Lin Sun feel enlightened. "Senior brother, what's the biggest reason?" He couldn't help asking. The farmer smiled honestly and raised a fist. "I have thought about it for many years, and finally found that the reason is here." Fist? Lin Sun was stunned. "Yes, whoever has the bigger fist has the bigger reason." The farmer looked serious. He was not joking. Whether it is the struggle for the great way or the struggle for orthodoxy, it is inseparable from fighting after all. Since there is a fight, whoever has the bigger fist will win. If you win the struggle for orthodoxy, your reason will become the reason of the world. Lin Sun asked, "In this case, why do you still want to reason with him?" The farmer shook his head. "Junior brother, when you meet someone you can reason with, you don't need to use your fists. Fists are used to deal with unreasonable people. Just like that old monk, he just attacked when he wanted to. I can only use my fists to reason with him." Lin Sun looked at the cloth-robed old man and said, "Senior brother, how are you going to reason with him?" The farmer said, "Junior brother, What do you think? At this moment, all eyes were on Lin Sun, especially the cloth-robed old man in Jintian Xianyue, who couldn't help but feel nervous. Even the old woman and the lad were curious about Lin Sun's answer. Everyone knew that Lin Sun's answer would affect the life and death of the cloth-robed old man. Lin Sun said without hesitation, "How about suppressing him for 10,000 years?" The face of the cloth-robed old man suddenly changed, but he was slightly relieved in his heart. 10,000 years? To a great emperor, it wasn't enough to affect a great emperor. But at this time, the farmer shook his head and criticized Lin Sun. "Junior brother, why are you more honest than me? Honest people are the easiest to suffer losses." Lin Sun was stunned, and his lips twitched imperceptibly. He finally realized the power of an honest man's words. "He is different from you. The road to the Emperor realm does not depend on the length of time you are trapped. What you lack most now is time." The farmer said seriously, "Therefore, his punishment to you is too heavy, but your punishment to him is too light. This is unfair." Lin Sun originally thought that this senior brother was a man of few words. Who would have thought that he was so serious and talkative when he was reasoning with him? However, Lin Sun didn't hate his temperament at all. On the contrary, he felt unspeakable and comfortable in his heart. Chapter 1929. To the cloth-robed elder, the farmer's words were like a heavy hammer that made his heart sink. It was about to sink to the bottom. It was obvious that the farmer did not intend to let him go just like that. The feeling of his fate being controlled by someone else and being judged made the cloth-robed elder's state of mind suffer. Ever since he became an emperor, it had been too long since he had experienced such a feeling. No one noticed that on the farmer's sleeve, a pink rose the size of a thumb bloomed. At the same time, a gentle voice sounded in the farmer's mind. 13th senior brother. In the ancient times, the ancestor of the Jintian clan, the White Emperor, once fought alongside senior brother Shuya. Since this person is the descendant of the White Emperor, it was not easy for him to achieve Dao. Just let him go. The farmer scratched his head and replied in his mind, "Ju and Huan." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by the gentle voice. "Don't try to reason with me. I'm not in the mood to listen." The farmer smiled bitterly in his mind. "Also, don't let the news of you being here leak out. I have already been targeted by those old bastards. You cannot be targeted as well." The voice completely disappeared at this point. The pink rose that appeared on the farmer's sleeves also withered and disappeared. The farmer sighed. Then he looked at the cloth-robed elder who looked like he was ready to be slaughtered and said, "You have a good ancestor." These words seemed very abrupt and inexplicable, but it made the eyes of the cloth-robed elder brighten. As expected, the farmer said in the next moment, "However, you can avoid death, but you cannot escape punishment." The cloth-robed elder said without hesitation, "No matter what kind of compensation or punishment, I am willing to accept it." The farmer took out a gray seed and said, "This is the seed of the locking heart herb of the netherworld. Swear not to reveal what happened today and swallow it." Locking heart herb of the netherworld. It was a wondrous item that could seal an oath within and plant it in a cultivator's state of mind. Once the oath was broken, the locking heart herb of the netherworld would wither and turn into a unique type of ash, corroding and staining the cultivator's state of mind. This request was too simple. The cloth-robed elder made the oath without hesitation and swallowed the seed. Seeing this, the farmer nodded and said, "My junior brother also needs to be compensated." As for what the compensation would be, he didn't say. However, the linen-robed elder agreed once more. Compensation? No matter how outrageous Lin Sun's request was, he could agree to it. Seeing that he was so straightforward, the farmer's expression softened a little, and he said, "I advise you not to bring shame to your ancestors in the future." The cloth-robed old man was stunned, and a thought couldn't help but appear in his mind. Could it be that this person actually knows the first ancestor? At that moment, the farmer took out another Lockhart netherworld herb seed and handed it to Jintian Xianyue. How could Jintian Xianyue not know what to do? He also made an oath and swallowed the item, but his expression was a little dim. She, who was proud and arrogant, had suffered too many blows today, and it was too heavy. After that, the farmer pointed into the distance. "You can leave now." The old man bowed and expressed his thanks. Then, he turned around and left with Jin Tian Xinhua. He was afraid that the farmer would change his mind if he stayed any longer. "And you?" The farmer looked at Liang Chuan in the distance. The latter shuddered and almost fell to the ground. With such a poor temperament, it's no wonder he has no fate to become an emperor. The farmer shook his head. In the end, Liang Chuan also made an oath and swallowed the seed of Lockhart Netherworld herb. He didn't resist at all, but felt lucky to escape from death. The farmer waved his sleeve, and Liang Chuan disappeared from the guest mountain. "Junior brother, you won't blame me for not killing that old man, will you?" A look of embarrassment appeared on the farmer's dark face. Anyone who saw him would think that he was a farmer. He didn't look like a horrible existence who had just killed an emperor realm and forced another emperor realm to bow his head. "I'm very happy in my heart, and my mind is clear," Lin Sun said with a smile. "What a clear mind." The farmer also grinned happily. He couldn't help but want to reason with Lin Sun again, but he held back in the end. It was the first time they met, so it was better not to leave such an old-fashioned impression on his junior brother. "Junior brother, wait a moment. Although it's over, there are still some things that need to be said," the farmer said, and then disappeared into thin air. In the courtyard, the young man in linen clothes was puzzled. According to the farmer's style of doing things, it was impossible for him to let the old man off so easily. Yet, it ended just like that. There must be more to it than meets the eye. Just as the young man was thinking, the old woman next to him suddenly said, "Young master, stay here and don't move." The young man was dazed, and his heart tightened. Was the farmer not going to let his granny go? Just as he thought of this, his vision blurred, and he lost his senses. At the same time, the farmer appeared in the courtyard and looked at the old woman. The old woman spoke first. "Dao friend, do you also want this old woman to eat a core-locking netherworld grass?" Wisps of profound light surged in her murky eyes, and her entire aura changed along with it. The farmer's voice was heavy. "You're so beautiful. You're not an old woman. This kind of disguise can't fool me." The old woman was dazed. An honest person would care about whether someone else was beautiful or not. However, when she spoke again, her appearance had already silently changed from an old woman to a great beauty that was peerless, like a celestial. She wore a green dress, and her black hair was tied up in a bun. Her skin was smooth and white, and her eyes were like the moon in the sky. Her red lips formed a perfect curve. There was a bright red cinnabar up between her eyebrows. She stood there, her green dress fluttering, and her figure was like an illusion. "Since you've seen through me, there's no need for me to hide anymore." The woman in the green dress spoke. Her voice was as clear as jade, and it was as pleasant as the sound of nature. This was a peerless empress of peerless beauty. However, the farmer ignored her and said, "Since you're from the Xian family, you naturally don't need the core-locking netherworld grass." He had a serious expression. "I'm here to tell you that my little junior brother doesn't ask for anyone to be his scapegoat or drag you down with him. He won't push his luck, and he won't overestimate himself. You can think of him as weak, but his future achievements will only be greater than yours." Then, he turned around and left. The woman in the green dress was stunned. She was prepared to fight with all her strength if the farmer dared to ask her to swallow the core, locking netherworld grass. However, he had never expected that the other party had only come to say such words. For a moment, she felt a tightness in her chest. Revenge. This seemingly honest farmer had actually witnessed everything that had happened on the guest mountain today. He knew that he had impolitely warned that young man. He came here to avenge the young man. The woman in the green dress gritted her teeth. "Greater achievements than me? I've lived for so many years and seen the rise and fall of the Emperor realm." She was indeed a little annoyed. They were both emperors, but she was reprimanded in this way. This feeling was really unpleasant. At this time, there was a happy smile on the farmer's dark face. He thought that what he had done this time could satisfy his junior brother. This should be the responsibility of a senior brother, right? "Junior brother, my common name is too vulgar. Since I joined the sect, my master has given me the Dharma name Pujin, and I'm ranked 13th. When he saw Lin again, the farmer introduced himself. Before I joined the sect, I was indeed a farmer in the field, and I couldn't read a word. Later, I was enlightened by my master and embarked on the road of cultivation. I'm different from Guyu Pu, the 9th senior brother. He's really stupid, like a block of wood. I'm too honest to tell lies. But Master said that all living things in the world are different, and honest people have their own advantages. I'm best at farming. After joining the sect, I helped to take care of and cultivate all kinds of spiritual plants. Later, I traveled around the world and tasted all kinds of spiritual grains, spiritual plants, and spiritual medicines. Finally, I found the way I wanted to pursue. As he said, the farmer, who called himself Pujin, took out a jade slip and handed it to Lin. Junior brother, this is the Book of Herbs in Heaven, which I personally compiled. It's a collection of spiritual plants that grow in many worlds on the ancient way of the starry sky. It's not a cultivation method, so it's not very precious. Take it, and if you encounter spiritual plants that you can't recognize in the future, you can take it out and have a look. Lin Sun opened it and couldn't help but gasp after a while. The types of spiritual objects recorded within the Myriad Herb scripture were simply as vast as the ocean, and they were innumerable. Every single spiritual object was specifically recorded in detail. For example, the name, shape, use, place of growth, and so on were accompanied by vivid illustrations. For alchemists in the world, this kind of scripture could be regarded as the supreme treasure that could only be found by chance, and its value was immeasurable. Even a practitioner like Lin Sun could deeply understand the essence and mystery of the spiritual plants of heaven and earth by reading this scripture, which was of great benefit to his cultivation. It should be known that all things in the world were nurtured by Tao. The mystery of Tao was actually hidden in all phenomena, all things and all things in the world. And what the practitioners perceived and sought for the way of cultivation was the things and things existing in the world. Thank you for imparting the scripture to me, senior brother. Lin Sun bowed seriously. Pujin hurriedly waved his hand. You and I are brothers. Don't be so polite. He looked up at the void in the distance and sighed. There's not much time left. If I stay here any longer, I will be noticed. Junior brother, the way is long. I'm looking forward to the day when you become an emperor. His voice was full of laughter and expectation. Where are you going, senior brother? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Pujin grinned, to the place where wandering ghosts should go. After saying that, he carried the rusty stick and walked forward. With one step, he was already above the void of the starry sky. Junior brother, see you later. Pujin's honest laughter rang in Lin Sun's heart for a long time before it disappeared. Senior brother, see you later. Lin Sun looked up and murmured. P.S. Thanks Xia Ji, Huang Lianping, and other students for their gifts and support. Chapter 1930. As the farmer, Pu Zhen, left, the invisible force covering the welcoming mountain disappeared, and the ancient trees that shrouded the entire boat also disappeared. Everything returned to its previous, tranquil state. To most of the passengers on the airship, they utterly didn't notice that numerous extremely dangerous and shocking battles had erupted just now. They also didn't know that if it weren't for the farmer's protection, they in the boat would have been turned into dust in Zhou. But there was still a lot of news. There were many other passengers living on the welcoming mountain. At the beginning, everyone saw that Lin Sun had killed Wu Yunlian, the descendant of the Tianyin Pavilion, and suppressed Jin Tianqi and other strong cultivators of the Jintian clan. It also caused Wu Ming, the descendant of the Hidden Land realm, and Jintian Xianyue, the proud daughter of the Jintian clan, to fight together. But at the end of the battle, both Wu Ming and Jintian Xianyue were defeated by Lin Sun. Many people even saw the appearance of Sword Emperor Fufeng at the last moment. At that time, many people sighed and thought that Lin Sun would die this time, and the starry ancient path would lose an amazing ultimate Saint King forever. As for what happened after the appearance of Sword Emperor Fufeng, no one could see it. At this moment, the boat returned to its usual calm. All the cultivators on and off the welcoming mountain breathed a sigh of relief, and then began to pay attention to the result of the battle. After that, a scene that caused all of them to feel disbelief appeared. Yu Xian was not dead. How is this possible? Many people almost went crazy. How could this guy not be dead? This was too unexpected. In the following time, people found many strange things one after another. For example, the group of people from the Hidden Land realm who lived in the courtyard at the foot of the mountain had all disappeared. It was as if they had evaporated from the world. The boat sails in the starry sky. With the strength of the descendants of the Xidigarba, unless they are led by someone in the Emperor realm. Doesn't this mean that they are very likely to be in trouble? Countless cultivators were shocked in their hearts, and they felt shocked. If their guesses are true, then who killed them? At the same time, the Jintian clan was also very abnormal. Both Sword Emperor Fufeng and Jintian Xianyue did not come out and did not mention anything about what had happened before. This caused everyone to be shocked and confused. Yu Xian suppressed Jin Tianqi and the others and defeated Jintian Xianyue. Sword Emperor Windraiser was going to swallow his anger like this? A great emperor. How could he give up just like that? Question after question surged into the hearts of those cultivators, and in the end, all of them transformed into a single question. Exactly what happened after Sword Emperor Windraiser made an appearance? Why was Yu Xian still alive? Why did Xidigarba's successor disappear? And why didn't the monarch race, the Jintian clan, say anything? This news quickly spread throughout the rowboat, causing an uproar and confusion. Yu Xian, this expert from the Yu clan, an imperial clan, had become the center of attention in a single leap. Everyone was shocked by the heaven-defying battle prowess he displayed, but at the same time, they were extremely confused. Just what method did he use to survive this extremely dangerous storm? Just look at the Heavenly Music Parlor's reaction. Yu Xian didn't just kill Wu Yunlian. He even killed Yu Jun and a group of important figures from the Heavenly Music Parlor. If the Heavenly Music Parlor chose to tolerate this, then it proves that something is definitely not normal. Many people came to this conclusion and began to pay attention to the movements of the Heavenly Music Parlor. They didn't dare to ask the Jintian clan, nor did they have the guts to ask Lin Sun about the cause of the matter. If they wanted to know the truth, they could only pay attention to the movements of the Heavenly Music Parlor. In a grand hall, a group of important figures gathered. Xiao Yunkong and Ouyang Pei, who used to guard Zhuang Yunji, were also here. Zhuang Yunji was also here. But no matter who it was, their expressions were extremely gloomy and ugly. The Supreme Elder Liang Chuan sat at the head of the table, his expression numb and his voice hoarse. These days, many things have happened on our rowboat and caused a lot of turmoil. His words evoked everyone's memories. At first, the people of the primitive Dao court were all killed, causing turmoil. Then, the Supreme Elder Huadian, who was pursuing the murderer, knelt in front of the old lady, causing an uproar. And today, Jin Tianqi and the other cultivators of the Jintian clan were beaten, and Yu Jun and Wu Yunlian were killed. This was like a bolt of lightning, throwing the Heavenly Music Parlor into chaos. This was too many and too heavy a blow. And now, everyone knew that these things were all done by one person, Yu Xian, a figure from the Yu clan of the Imperial clan, who was almost ignored before. But now, at the thought of this name, people gnashed their teeth with hatred and almost went crazy. Only Zhuang Yunji's expression was very complicated. When the rowboat passed by the Dayu world, she personally picked up Lin Sun and arranged for Yu Xian to be Lu Qingyan's guard. At that time, she just wanted to use Yu Xian's identity to make others have scruples and not dare to kill Lu Qingyan easily. But unexpectedly, Yu Xian's identity didn't play any role, and even Lu Qingyan's master, was grounded. Originally, Zhuang Yunji was disheartened, but what she never expected was that Yu Xian's identity was useless, but his combat power played an incredible destructive role. He killed the cultivators of the primitive Dao court. He suppressed Jin Tianqi and the others. Even Yu Jun, Wu Yunlian, and others were killed by him without hesitation. This series of events caused Zhuang Yunji to feel as if she was in a dream. It was so shocking, yet so unreal. But in any case, she couldn't hate Yu Xian at all. because she knew that Yu Xian didn't have to do this. Everything was for her disciple, Lu Qingyan. Uncle Master Liang Chuan, why did you spare Yu Xian? Now it's said that Yu Xian is still alive. Ouyang Pei said angrily with a livid face. His disciple Zhanbing was killed like Wu Yunlian, which made him feel like a knife was twisted in his heart. That's right. All of this calamity was caused by Yu Xian. How can such an unpardonable person be allowed to live? The others present also gnashed their teeth and spoke out. Liang Chuan's heart was bitter, and his expression was uncertain. Kill Yu Xian? Monk Dukong of the Hidden Land realm was dead, and Sword Emperor Fufeng bowed his head. Who dared to kill him? But he dared not say these things, and he couldn't say them. He could only let them rot in his stomach. Everyone, at the end of the day, Yu Xian did it for Qingyan's good. If he didn't target Qingyan, how could these disasters have happened? Liang Chuan sighed softly and said, I called you here to tell you that from today on, no matter who it is, no one is allowed to treat Yu Xian as an enemy. If anyone dares to take revenge, I promise to kill him immediately. At the end of his words, his expression was full of murderous intent. The main hall was dead silent. Everyone was stunned and almost couldn't believe their ears. Yu Xian was the culprit. Why did Highest Elder Liang Chuan seem to be determined to protect him? Liang Chuan, you're a bastard. Suddenly, an incomparably angry roar sounded. Hua Dian's figure broke through the air, his momentum fierce. His expression was terrifyingly savage, and his eyes almost split apart from rage. So many things have occurred, yet you don't take revenge and instead protect that bastard surnamed you. You have simply smeared your heart with lard. His roar was like thunder, shaking the main hall and filling the air with murderous intent, causing many to hold their breath. How terrifying would a quasi-emperor be when he was enraged? Senior brother Hua Dian, you've been in closed-door cultivation, so you don't know the truth. If you trust me, then listen to me. I won't make a mistake. Liang Chuan took a deep breath and spoke with a stern expression. He knew that Hua Dian was angry because his granddaughter, Wu Yunlian, had been killed by Yu Xian. You're trying to persuade me? Hua Dian was so angry that his hair stood on end and his body trembled. You coward trash, if you don't kill that bastard, I'll go. Liang Chuan's heart tightened and his expression changed. Senior brother, don't do anything stupid. If you do, everyone in the Heavenly Music Pavilion will be implicated. However, Hua Dian refused to listen to him. He said coldly, I'll deal with you when I return. He then turned around to leave. However, as soon as he turned around, his vision blurred. He was blocked by a figure. It was an old man in a linen robe. His face was thin and his expression was indescribably cold. Liang Chuan's heart skipped a beat. His legs turned to jelly and he cursed under his breath. Who dares to stop me? Get lost. At this moment, the enraged Hua Dian had attacked without the slightest hesitation. Boom! He slammed his palm forward. However, in the next moment, he was lifted up by the neck by a hand. Hua Dian was shocked and completely sobered up from his rage. At the same time, the linen robe elder said, Why is there such an idiot in the Heavenly Music Pavilion? Why don't I help you deal with him? No. Liang Chuan was just about to stop him when he heard a loud explosion. Hua Dian, a great emperor of the great emperor realm, exploded into pieces and turned into ashes that scattered all over the ground. Liang Chuan's vision darkened, and he was in a daze. The rest of the people in the hall were also completely shocked at this moment. Each and every one of them were paralyzed on the ground, their faces pale and filled with terror. Killing a great emperor with a flick of his finger, they immediately guessed the linen robe elder's identity. However, they never thought that Sword Monarch Fufeng would appear here and stop Elder Hua Dian from killing Yu Xian. This was simply unimaginable. One should know that Yu Xian had offended many people from the Jintian clan. From today onward, whoever dares to go against little friend Yu Xian will be going against the Jintian clan. The linen robe elder didn't explain either. After saying that, he disappeared into thin air. There was a dead silence in the hall. Everyone felt like they were on the verge of collapsing. Elder Liang Chuan's unusual behavior to protect Yu Xian was unacceptable. But now, even Sword Monarch Fufeng stood out and expressed his support for Yu Xian. Only Liang Chuan knew that Sword Monarch Fufeng had no choice but to do this. Chapter 1931. Hua Dian, the Quasi-Emperor, was killed. Both Fufeng, Sword Emperor, and Liang Chuan, the Supreme Elder of Heavenly Sound Pavilion, expressed their support for Yu Xian in person. Every single cultivator that found out about this was flabbergasted, and it was like they'd heard the most bizarre thing in the world. Yu Xian, who caused so many troubles and was regarded as the culprit, was not only alive, but also better than anyone expected. At least from now on, no one on this Fuyishi ship would dare to harm him. What on earth happened at that time? Why did Fuyao Sword Emperor and Liang Chuan act so strangely? There must be some unknown secrets about Yu Xian. For a time, there was a lot of discussion. At the same time, Lin Sun was also helpless. After learning all kinds of news from the outside world, Lu Qingyin seemed to be possessed. After a long time, she began to ask all kinds of questions. She looked like a curious baby. Lin Sun explained everything that could be explained, but he couldn't tell Lu Qingyin about Pu Zhen and what happened that night. Lu Qingyin was obviously unwilling to give up, so she began to beat around the bush, almost acting like a spoiled child. But Lin Sun had no choice but to be vague and keep his mouth shut. At present, his identity was still Yu Xian. Even if he exposed a lot of strength and aroused a lot of suspicion, at least no one knew his true identity. In the end, Lu Qingyin didn't get the reason. However, the way she looked at Lin Sun had become different. She looked as if she was going to figure out his secrets sooner or later, which made Lin Sun uncomfortable all over. From that day on, Lin Sun's life became extremely peaceful. In addition to cultivation, he thought about what would happen after he arrived in the Hongmeng world. Occasionally, he would go out, but no matter where he appeared, he would encounter many strange eyes along the way. There was awe, curiosity, doubt, and confusion. That feeling made him feel like a different person. Even the young man in linen, who claimed to be Xian Jiuyin, would lie on the wall and throw out many doubts such as, "Dude, which big shot are you the descendant of? Brother, is that senior who likes to reason really your senior brother? Brother, you can't blame me for leaving you to die. I'm truly powerless. However, can't you tell me the truth? Are you a descendant of the imperial clan, the Yu clan?" Brother, of course Lin Sun couldn't answer, so he just stayed in the courtyard and didn't go out, focusing on cultivation. During this period, Zhuang Yunji also came to tell Lin that the primitive Taoist court was still a big trouble. When they reached the primordial world, the successor of the primordial Tao court, Kong Yu, would definitely not let the matter rest. Lin Sun didn't say anything about it. Not only was Kong Yu a descendant of the primeval Tao court, but he was also a pure-blooded descendant of the imperial Kong family. His identity was not simple at all, but Lin Sun didn't care at all. After all, Kong Yu's ancestor, the demon emperor of Dutian, had been suppressed by Gyupu for countless years. Right now, the primordial spirit of the demonic Arch of Dutian was suppressed in the great Tao bottomless tower. In less than 10 years, it would be completely refined. Under such circumstances, how could Lin Sun care about the threat from Kong Yu? Sword Emperor Fufeng also came. He was very gentle and didn't treat Lin Sun as a junior from beginning to end. He intended to make some compensation to Lin Sun. Although the 13th senior brother Pu Zhen spared him once, he proposed that Lin Sun should be compensated. Sword Emperor Fufeng didn't dare to take it lightly. But Lin Sun shook his head and said that he didn't need any compensation. This made Sword Emperor Fufeng feel helpless. No compensation? How could he do that? During this period of time, the problem of compensation had almost become a sore point for Sword Emperor Fufeng. Compensation was necessary, but he didn't know what to compensate. For example, in the beginning, he killed Hua Dian to show his protective attitude towards Lin Sun. In fact, he had already begun to compensate Lin Sun. But obviously, this was far from enough. What should I compensate? Cultivation method? He probably doesn't care about it all. Treasures? With such a senior brother in the Emperor realm, how could he lack treasures? In the courtyard, Sword Emperor Fufeng was very conflicted. Old ancestor, Yu Xian's senior brother has already left. Why are you so conflicted about compensation? Jin Tian Xianhua didn't understand. Her old ancestor was Sword Emperor Fufeng, who shook the starry sky. Perhaps he wasn't a match for the farmer, but he was a true Emperor realm expert. Now that the farmer had already left, why was there a need to be so serious about compensation? Lass, you don't understand. Sword Emperor Fufeng sighed. The road to Emperor realm is filled with obstacles. It's not as simple as you think. I've been an emperor for 30,000 years, but until now, I've only touched the threshold of no self, no world. This is only the first barrier on the path to the Emperor realm, and it's called unobtrusiveness. Since the ancient times, more than half of all the people that have stepped foot into the Emperor realm have been obstructed before this first barrier. Hearing this, Jin Tian Xianhua was stunned. He had been an emperor for 30,000 years, but he had only touched the threshold of the first obstacle of Emperor realm. Then how difficult would the road to Emperor realm be? Sword Emperor Fufeng's voice was low, like that old monk Dukong. Don't be fooled by his control of the light and darkness Zen body and the body transformation art of Ksiddhartha Buddha's inheritance. But on the road to Emperor realm, he's at about the same level as me. As for the old woman beside the young man, surnamed Xian, she might be slightly stronger, but she's at most at the first level of Emperor realm. But that farmer is different. As he spoke up to hear, Sword Emperor Fufeng's eyes flashed with imperceptible shock, and he fell into silence. After waiting for a long time and not getting a reply, Jin Tian Xianhua couldn't help but ask, "Old ancestor, could it be that he has already crossed the first obstacle of Emperor realm?" Sword Emperor Fufeng shook his head. Even someone who has crossed the first obstacle of Emperor realm can't easily suppress old monk Dukong with 3 punches. His words caused Jin Tian Xianhua to gasp. Could it be that his realm is even higher? Sword Emperor Fufeng said, "Yes, even higher. As for how high it is, I'm unable to see it with my realm." As he spoke up to hear, Sword Emperor Fufeng sighed in his heart. Back then, he took the initiative to lower his head and admit defeat because there was no way to resist, otherwise he would definitely die. The existence of Emperor realm might seem impressive, but in the eyes of those in the same realm, this realm was extremely difficult. If the Emperor realm was said to be an extremely dangerous mountain, then he, Sword Emperor Fufeng, had only been lingering at the foot of the mountain for 30,000 years. As for that farmer, he had probably already ascended the mountain. As for where he was, Sword Emperor Fufeng couldn't see it. Jin Tian Xianhua asked, "Old ancestor, no matter how strong that person is, didn't he not make things too difficult for us in the end?" "You don't understand." Sword Emperor Fufeng said, "I'm sure that he already had the intention to kill me, but he changed his mind in the end. If I'm not wrong, it must be because of our ancestor." Jin Tian Xianhua was stunned. She clearly remembered that the farmer said, "You have a good ancestor." Could it be that he recognizes our ancestor? Jin Tian Xianhua had a shocked expression. The Jin Tian clan's ancestor was the primordial White Emperor, a supreme figure, a legend who had personally created White Emperor City. Before him, Sword Emperor Fufeng was merely a 16th generation descendant of the Jin Tian clan. There was a huge gap in seniority. Even if he doesn't recognize him, he must have given face to our ancestor. Sword Emperor Fufeng said, "Under such circumstances, how can I not take his words to heart?" As he spoke up to hear, looking at the graceful and beautiful Jin Tian Xianhua sitting in front of him, Sword Emperor Fufeng's heart suddenly moved. "Xianhua, you fought with Yuxian before. What do you think of his strength?" Jin Tian Xianhua pondered. "I can only describe him as unfathomable. I suspect that he can even be ranked in the top 30 of the All Heavens King Sage board. He's only at the peak early Saint King realm now. If he continues to improve in the future, his strength will only be more terrifying." Speaking of this, she sighed faintly. "Although I was defeated by him, I have to admit that his attainments in the peak Saint King realm are much higher than mine." Sword Emperor Fufeng was silent for a moment and said, "Xianhua, sometimes a disaster can also become an opportunity. This is the case now. Are you willing to fight for it?" Jin Tian Xianyue was startled and said, "Please enlighten me, ancestor." On the same day, the boat that had gradually calmed down once again caused an uproar because of a piece of news. The peerless fairy of the Jintian clan, Jintian Xianyue, wants to follow Yu Xian to cultivate. For this, she didn't hesitate to wait in front of Yu Xian's door. As soon as the news came out, everyone was dumbfounded. The Jintian clan, an imperial clan, was one of the top ancient clans in the starry sky. There had been many Emperor realm cultivators from this clan, and Jintian Xianyue was the most dazzling star of the current generation. For example, she even had Sword Emperor Fufeng accompanying her on this trip. But now, she wanted to follow Lin Sun and act as a Tao's servant. This was too shocking. Xianyue fairy. How can she do this? Many cultivators who had been admiring her were heartbroken because of this. Yu Xian is really a lucky guy. There were also many envious and jealous voices. Not only did Golden Sky Xianyue possess an outstanding appearance that made her seem like a celestial maiden of the moon, her background was extremely noble as well. If one was able to gain her favor, it would be sufficient to cause one to be overwhelmed by the favor. But now, she took the initiative to follow Yu Xian to cultivate. Who could accept this at once? No, I don't agree. Some people even shouted and gnashed their teeth, thinking that Yu Xian was not worthy of Jintian Xianyue at all. Soon, many people bluntly attacked. Didn't you see that Sword Emperor Fufeng didn't refuse? Who do you think you are? What qualifications do you have to refuse? In short, Jintian Xianyue's action caused too much uproar. Countless people were shocked and couldn't believe it. But to everyone's astonishment, Yu Xian refused. It was said that even the gate of the courtyard was not opened, leaving Jintian Xianyue, the peerless beauty, standing alone outside the door. Chapter 1932. Fix a Bug. The 13th senior fellow apprentice of Mind Mountain was Li Xianwei, known as Green Sky Sword Emperor, who once gave Lin Sun the Great Way immeasurable bottle. When the protagonist left Kunlun ruins, he defeated Sword Emperor, Jade Huzi, Buddha Kunjiu, Dark War Emperor, Red Fire Thunder Emperor, and Jiuzhen Sword Emperor. Because of Goldfish's carelessness, she made a mistake in the ranking of the farmer Puzhan. The article had been revised. Puzhan was ranked 11th. Sorry, my friends. I've been busy with my wedding recently. I'm a little tired. I feel dizzy. The following text, Jintian Xianyue, dressed in a plain dress, had a pale face. She didn't expect that she would be rejected before she even met Yu Xian. She was extremely proud and conceited in the past. She hesitated and deliberated for a long time before she lowered her head and was willing to play the role of a Taoist servant. But she never thought that she would be rejected. For a moment, she couldn't help feeling ashamed and frustrated. But in the end, Jintian Xianyue held back. She didn't leave, nor did she get angry. She just stood in front of Lin Sun's courtyard. Alone, he stood there in silence. No matter how many rumors about her spread on the ship, she seemed to turn a deaf ear to them. Senior Yu Xian, Jintian Xianyue is a proud girl. She is accompanied by a martial emperor. Are you just going to leave her there? In the courtyard, Lu Qingyin couldn't help asking. She couldn't bear to do that. Lin Sun, who was studying the Book of Herbs of Heaven, said casually, "That's her own business. It has nothing to do with me." He felt helpless. He had vaguely guessed that the reason why Jintian Xianyue wanted to be his Taoist servant was probably because of Sword Emperor Fufeng's instruction. But the point was that Lin Sun couldn't agree at all, because Jintian Xianyue was extremely famous. If she followed him, it would inevitably attract a lot of attention. In this way, it would be very easy for his true identity to be exposed. Lin Sun asked, "By the way, we will arrive at the Hongmeng world in a few months. What's your plan, Miss Qingyan?" Lu Qingyan hesitated for a moment, but still said, "Master said that there is a mysterious place called Dayan Pure Land in the Hongmeng world. The cultivators there are all senior masters who have entered the Tao through temperament. Master has promised to bring me there. If I can cultivate in the Pure Land of Dayan, I won't have to fear Kong Yu's threat." Lin Sun said, "That would be great." He couldn't expose his identity. When he arrived at the Hongmeng world, he was bound to be separated from Lu Qingyan. At that time, he was doomed to be unable to continue to take care of Lu Qingyan. If Lu Qingyan could cultivate in the Dain Pure Land, Lin wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. Thinking of this, Lin Sun asked, Miss Qingyan, do you know whether the Dain Pure Land accepts successors? Lu Qingyan shook her head. Master only said to give it a try. Whether it succeeds or not depends on fate. It depends on fate. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. If so, there was not much hope. He thought for a moment, then stood up and walked out of the courtyard. Outside the courtyard, looking at Lin Sun, who opened the door and came out, Jintian Xianyue showed a look of surprise and then became a little nervous. Lin Sun didn't care about this and said directly, Miss Xianyue, you can go back and tell Sword Emperor Fufeng that if he wants to compensate me, he only needs to do one thing for me. Jintian Xianyue was stunned and asked, What is it? Lin Sun transmitted his voice to her. After hearing this, Jintian Xianyue's beautiful face showed a touch of complexity. Taoism pure. In your opinion, I, Jintian Xianyue, am inferior to a successor of Tianyin Pavilion? Without waiting for an answer, she turned around and left. Her heart was full of bitterness. She, Jintian Xianyue, was a pure-blood descendant of the dignified Jintian clan, a peerless talent who ranked 49th on the Holy King list after 180 years of cultivation. Now, she didn't hesitate to bow her head and be willing to serve as a Taoism servant, but was refused. But Yu Xian took the initiative to propose a condition for compensation for an artistic practitioner, Lu Qingyan. Such a contrast also made the proud Jintian Xianyue suffer a blow. Watching her leave, Lin Sun shook his head and walked back to the courtyard. He said that as long as I help Lu Qingyan enter the Dain Pure Land, it will be considered as compensation. When Sword Emperor learned from Jintian Xianyue about the compensation proposed by Lin Sun, he couldn't help but feel surprised. Jintian Xianyue's eyebrows showed a touch of sadness, and she said, Ancestor, does Yu Xian really look down on me? Sword Emperor sighed in his heart. Originally, according to his idea, if he could let Jintian Xianyue follow Lin Sun to cultivate, it would be a good opportunity to make friends with Lin Sun. After all, Lin Sun had a senior brother in the Emperor realm whose realm was unfathomable. How powerful was the sect behind him? If Jintian Xianyue could take this opportunity to get Yu Xian's approval, she might get some unexpected good fortune. Who would have thought? Yu Xian refused. Xianyue, do you still remember that I took the initiative to admit defeat a few days ago? Taking a deep breath, Sword Emperor Fufeng looked at the junior in front of him, whom he admired the most, and said, This is just a setback on the path of cultivation. Don't be discouraged. Yu Xian may have his own ideas, but your path must not be disturbed because of this. Jintian Xianyue's body trembled, and she said, Thank you for your advice, Ancestor. Go. Sword Emperor Fufeng watched her leave, and he couldn't help but frown. In the primordial world, there were 6 Dao courts, 10 war clans, and many primordial imperial clans. It was regarded as the most prosperous, dazzling, and ancient world among the worlds of the primordial ancient path heavens. The Dain Pure Land was also an ancient force in the primordial world. But relatively speaking, this force was quite mysterious, and its descendants rarely appeared in the world. As far as Sword Emperor Fufeng knew, the most famous person in the Dain Pure Land was the Zither Emperor Xiaoxiang, who proved his Dao with music in the primordial era. His Zither music was the best in the starry sky, and it could kill demons and gods. It made people pale at the mention of it. It's not easy to join this sect. Sword Emperor Fufeng sighed. Sword Monarch Fufeng sighed softly. Although their Jintian clan was powerful and famous in the universe, they had no connection with the pure land of Dain. All right, how could I forget about him? If he takes action, he can definitely do it. Suddenly, Sword Emperor Fufeng thought of a person, and that person was on this boat. In the courtyard, the old lady looked at Sword Emperor Fufeng, who came to visit, and said indifferently, I didn't expect that in order to compensate that kid, you, an Emperor Realm cultivator, would lower yourself to beg me. Sword Emperor Fufeng smiled bitterly and said, I hope you can help me. The old lady pondered. If my Xian clan steps in, we can indeed make the day in Pure Land accept that little girl. However, my young master has always been interested in your Jintian clan's chaotic sword supporting scripture. I wonder if you can let my young master take a look? Sword Emperor Fufeng's lips twitched. The chaotic sword supporting scripture was their clan's inheritance. How could they let someone read it? This old lady was obviously asking for too much. Fellow Taoist, aren't you making things difficult for me? Sword Emperor Fufeng smiled bitterly. The young man in linen who had been listening at the side couldn't help but say, I don't want the chaotic sword supporting scripture either. I just want to see the power of this sword scripture. Sword Emperor Fufeng thought for a while and said, That's fine. The old lady felt helpless. This brat is really stupid. Can't he see that I'm doing him a favor? The young man in linen smiled and said in his heart, Of course I know to take advantage of the situation. I just want to do that brother a favor. And Sword Emperor Fufeng will definitely owe me a favor. It's killing two birds with one stone. On that day, Lin Sun got a token with the word Xian engraved on it. He also learned that with this token, Lu Qingyin could easily enter the day in Pure Land to cultivate. This Xian Jiuyin's origin isn't simple. Lin Sun stroked his chin. Even Sword Emperor Fufeng couldn't do it, but this guy could do it with a token. It could be seen how extraordinary the Xian clan was. Lin Sun recalled that she, the mysterious woman in the heaven-accessing place, once said that a peerless swordsman named Xian Shanshan entered the heaven-accessing place in primitive times. This person was also the only one who passed through the 9 levels of Green Cloud Path and opened the heaven-accessing door a little bit. She once said that before Lin Sun entered the heaven-accessing place, Xian Shanshan's talent and amazing foundation could be ranked first among all the challengers she had seen. Moreover, she once urged Lin Sun to remember the surname Xian because it was too extraordinary. It was mysterious and the door of all wonders. This surname wasn't something any clan could have. This Xian Jiuyin is probably the descendant of Xian Shanshan. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly had an impulse to meet Xian Jiuyin. Xian Shanshan had entered the heaven-accessing place before. The existence of the heaven-accessing place was related to his mother Luo Qingxuan, Lu Boya, and Luo Tontian, the master of the heaven-accessing place. As one of the challengers, Xian Shanshan must have known something about the heaven-accessing place. But in the end, Lin Sun still resisted this impulse. His current identity couldn't be exposed, and Xian Jiuyin might not know about the heaven-accessing place. If there's a chance in the future, I must inquire about it. Lin Sun secretly made a decision. As time went by, the boat shuttled through the Zhou starry sky without any disturbance. Unknowingly, another 2 months had passed. Boom! On this day, in the courtyard, Lin Sun's body roared, and a thick and boundless khaki divine brilliance emerged. In the spleen palace, the yellow fetus produced a violent vibration, like the beating of a divine drum, and the thick and substantial vitality was boiling and roaring. Finally, with a dull sound, above Lin Sun's head, the misty khaki light rain converged and turned into a yellow figure, exuding a vast, heavy, and immovable feeling from head to toe. Looking carefully, this Dharmakaya had handsome and elegant facial features, exactly the same as Lin Sun's appearance. Yellow Taoist body. Earth was one of the 5 elements. It represented the earth, and a gentleman was virtuous. This was a great Tao doppelganger born from the yellow fetus, showing a lofty, vast, and boundless charm. With the experience of condensing the greenwood Taoist body, Lin Sun was already familiar with condensing the yellow Taoist body. Boom! His essence, qi, spirit, and cultivation all gushed out and integrated into the yellow Taoist body.